Ready? Let's call the IT meeting to order. I need a motion to accept the minutes as mailed. First by Jimmy, second by Jim. Any omissions or corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carry.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Okay, so I have the reports to go through. So I think I'd like to start with the cybersecurity report. If that's okay. I did the same thing I did last month. So there are some new numbers. I don't know that this is definitely the answer yet. I do think it's some good data, but just want to see if anybody has any questions.
No questions? Okay.
Okay, the next report is the ticketing report for the month of May. We had any questions on that one as well? Oh, yeah.
Is that a higher number of tickets for alternative science in youth borough?
It might be, yes, because we have custom applications in there.
Okay.
And so when a ticket gets completed, I know she does work in spurts down there for some reporting needs or anything else they might need done.
Understood.
And then for the project report, we did complete 2 projects that I thought were fairly significant, at least they were long ongoing. One is the probation software that are now live on. Have been live for a couple of weeks now, and I believe things are going well. The vendor's been good, tying up just the last couple of loose ends. And then the DSS basement training rooms have been upgraded for IT. So the new solution is in place. We trained them on, it was last week, I want to say Thursday. We did the training, and actually I received a great call from DSS saying how simple it was and how happy they were. So I'm very hopeful that this will be a good solution for them. So if any of you use training rooms downstairs, just make sure you bring your laptop, and then the laptop will plug right in, and they have laminated instructions right in the front of the room down there. But it's supposed to be very, very simple now.
Okay. Any other questions for Jimmy?
A couple here were CAD server upgrades. The goal is June, waiting on vendor, 20% complete. What have we made on vendor for?
I should have moved, well, I will be probably moving that to yellow. We're waiting on them because they have to do it. They have to do the software side.
Okay.
So we're ready from a network side, but they have some software work to do. So I just, to be honest, I just reopened tickets that I had with them that they closed on me for no apparent reason. So.
And then on
we'll see.
DBW barn switching, that's just the opposite. We got the networking. Waiting on.
Actually, we have the printers. We're waiting on the switches. So we don't want to make 2 trips out there. So we'd rather just do it all at once. They said the switches were going to be in. First of all, they were delayed till August, and they said, oh, they're coming in May. Now they're June. So
It might actually be August.
yeah, well, hopefully not. I'm hoping they come in this month.
Okay.
We can get out there and get those all done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Just one thing, Terry, assistant on the voting machines.
Mhm. Well, thank you. It was a very educational experience. It's interesting to see how they all work. So thank you. I do have one other business.
You do?
For the cybersecurity officer position that's in my department. Well, it's currently we had set it up. We've been trying to fill it. We'd like to make some changes to that position, keep the same title, but make it a technical position that lives in my department. We'd like to increase the salary to be even with the assistant director position. So it would be 76 from currently 71 and change. I should have brought the exact numbers.
So currently it's 71,354 is the current base. And to be equal to the assistant director, the base would go to $76,845.
Motion to move it to personnel.
Second by Cassie. Any further discussion on this?
Do we have to move the backfoot request to personnel too? Or? Is that?
No, just go see. You know. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And I think that you will fill in the rest of it.
Yeah, there was a meeting with the chairwoman of the Government Ops Committee and the chair of the IT Committee, Terry and myself, where we spoke in depth. Sorry, who did we talk?
And then one.
Okay, Roger in the personnel office, county attorney. And we spoke in depth about the cybersecurity officer position and what, I guess, advantages there were to having it in IT versus where it is currently or has been living, which is with the county attorney. In that discussion, we realized that we could possibly be looking at the two positions instead of one. There's the cybersecurity officer, which is more technical, which Terry has made very clear. And then there's also the risk management part of the position, which is probably more of a county attorney position. So that's something that we'll be visiting as we look at the budget for next year and looking to create some kind of risk management position and looking at the duties to see what it is exactly we need. But we know that we have many items that seem to be growing by the day almost as far as risk management. We just have to make sure that we're on top of it. So that's the history of why.
I hear you just say you want to add an attorney, the IT department.
No, we're looking to have the cybersecurity officer, which has been moved to the IT department. Instead of just the one position, we're looking at some kind of risk management position to be added under the county attorney possibly for 2024.
And have the technical position live in IT, which is the cybersecurity officer, and then have a more administrative position to do risk management in another department like
For the IT, that's an increase of $5,000.
Well, yes and no. So it is an increase of the base, but it's actually a decrease from where the previous person that held the position was.
Which was at $81,454.
All right, so it's actually a decrease, really.
Yes.
The new person you're talking about, what base are you talking about?
We haven't even looked at it yet.
So
Safe to say 50,000?
More than that, most likely.
So the overall net impact is an increase in wages.
Well, the second position-
We can save for the IT, and then there's going to be an even larger increase, so it is going to be a net increase.
For next year, yes. At least that will be the request.
I think at this point, it became clear that we needed a different type of approach to this in terms of public. And so I don't think that conversation really started about what it's going to be. We'll be starting that conversation and figure out where it is. So, you know, it's yet still to be defined. There's still some work to be done to figure out what it will be, where it's going to live, how it's going to work, and what type of person you're going to need, so, and what level. So it's still in the early infancy.
I caused all that. I'm sorry.
Here too.
I think that we need to do some really long-term strategic planning here that we haven't been doing. We've been doing some really short-term thinking for the past 10 years or so. And I think we've got to do some strategic planning, especially in the area of risk management. And I think it involves not only cybersecurity, but a whole bunch of other stuff. Everything from how come we didn't hear about the pipes breaking in probation until somebody went in by accident to you know, how do we manage our risk and, you know, the chairman shooting off his mouth to the papers. I mean, there's all kinds of risk management stuff here. I think that doesn't include entirely just cybersecurity. I think it's something we got to strategically look at. If you decide you want to put your heads in the sand and not do it, well, we can decide that. But I think budget time is time to do it.
Sounds to me like we're talking about a czar, some sort of czar. And
It sounds to me
our
like
population base in this county is decreasing, but we're increasing the employees in this building.
it sounds to me like we're talking about a risk management person. That's what it sounds like we're talking about.
Some of the
Long-term,
items
we
that-
probably need that person.
Some of the items that we had mentioned.
Well, thank you, Dan. I appreciate that vote of confidence. And I love those one hand.
Some of the items that we mentioned as far as risk management, where we think it could be an opportunity to protect the county. We mentioned obviously cybersecurity, we mentioned the HIPAA laws, vulnerability assessments, overall information security, we mentioned the Clean Slate Act. I know the sheriff, I just saw a request this morning, he has some training he's going to be attending as far as the records that they have to have sealed as far as that goes. So yeah, there's a lot of vulnerabilities and we just want to make sure we're not caught without being prepared.
Dave, can I talk?
Yeah, go ahead.
In reality, there's like all these things popping up in all the departments where they could be looking for somebody like, we need somebody to watch what's going on in our department. This one needs somebody to watch what's going on in their department. What we're hoping is instead of having a person in each department is to get one person to pick up the other half of the cybersecurity training and risk management side, as well as encompass as many of these other department needs as we can. And hopefully have to only hire one person for now to do all of that instead of one in each department.
Isn't
But
that
it's
kind of
very
what the
random.
administrator is supposed to do?
Not on this level, because for the cybersecurity, as you look into it, and we're really early into the cybersecurity, but as you look into it more, it's more than just a technical aspect, which is increasing the need for the technical part. There's also the training part and the risk management part and what's going out. But as long as we're hiring or looking to hire another person to handle that, let's make sure we're utilizing that person as full as we can. And look at the other departments that also need to monitor the risk management. And maybe in this infant stage of looking at it, we can find a person to encompass all of that, which is above and beyond what Melissa's doing already, or not above, but
Sounds
More
like you
stuff.
need an IT Don Lehman.
I think time changes all circumstances, and in the day, you know, where we had our physical doors locked and everything was locked and we could protect the information by not allowing them into the vault, those kind of days are gone, and that information is out there in many ways. It's not just digital, it's not just on the website, it's not just on our computers, but it's also people coming and playing tricks and trying to get physical access into things. People maybe having information out, and with all of the First Amendment people that are out there and all of those things going on, that we have a duty to be able to protect all of our citizens' data and protect ourselves from any risk that we might have. And I know some of this isn't necessarily, you know, IT. I think the risk side of IT is very, very, very important. I don't know that it's a 40-hour-a-week job just to do the risk side, but when you incorporate all the other areas that we're not currently covered against right now, and that we're maybe not protecting ourselves as much, I think it really, I hope that everyone will just take a look, you know, at this risk management position. I think it's so important. You know, I think everything Melissa does and the oversight of it is super important, but somebody to actually understand risk, understand what those statistics are, and be able to analyze what is risky, what is not risky, is just so important for us to protect our constituents and ourselves.
Dana, I appreciate your concern about possible increase in salaries. But in actuality, good risk management over the long run will save you money.
Mm-hmm.
It prevents, if you do it right, it prevents the possibility of lawsuits, things happening like pipes breaking and things like that. So I think if you look at it from that point of view, and the position is structured that way, it will save us money.
Again, this is just the start of the conversation. And there's more information to gather, and I don't think when we had this brief meeting and talked about it for half an hour or so, you know, it really is the start of a discussion and planning process that has to be put together carefully, then analyze what parts of the county do we need them. And can we combine things being done in other departments in one place? So more to come. This is just an informational session at this point. Dana?
You got to realize there's 17 political supervisors in this county. 3 maybe speak their mind. So this risk management might seek to muzzle politicians speaking their mind for the public. We got to realize we are politicians elected to serve the public, but this sounds to me like kind of an attorney thing. Now, Roger would prefer zero risk on anything. That's an attorney look at it, but you can't do that if you are a politician. So I don't like this idea. I'll tell you right at the front.
Well, I guess to respond to that briefly, yes, I would prefer zero risk. because I realize I'm not the politician, and it's up to the politicians to decide how much risk they want to incur. So it's my job to explain to you what that risk is, and for your job to decide what your appetite for that risk is. But in some cases, like compliance, you don't have a choice. Public health just got a new 40-page compliance regime that they're gonna have to go through to make sure that deals not only records, but reports, audits, all this stuff. There has to be a compliance officer designated, you've seen that in all these different departments. I was gonna keep my powder dry for the argument in fall or whenever budget time was, but I guess I can't help myself because I'm a lawyer and I like to talk too. But it's not to tell people what to say. It's to make sure we're complying with all the regulations we have, and while the number of people gets smaller, the number of regulations gets bigger. Every time we lose a person, we get 90 pages of regulations to replace that we still have to comply with. So the regulations get bigger, the regulations get more complicated. Then we have new laws like sealing these records. We have to make sure they're sealed. If we inadvertently release one, that's a private right of action to whoever's record we release. They can sue us individually. It's not just a violation of the law, it's an individual lawsuit. And think about how many records we have out there that we're now gonna have to seal to make sure they don't get out. So there's things like that. Stephanie's got records down there. We gotta make sure Social Security numbers don't inadvertently get out. And they're recorded on deeds and transfer things. So there's all kinds of information that we handle. But then there's all kinds of regulations we have to comply with. All that folds into risk. And the hard thing about risk management, the hard thing about safety, the hard thing about any of that is you don't know what didn't happen because you were there. You know what happened, right? But I don't know that a worker at UPW might have been safer because Phil was out there looking at his project and something didn't happen. I don't know that we didn't have a data breach. We didn't have a data breach because Terry's people are looking for things. So you only know when something goes wrong. You never really know in that business when something goes right, but you have to at least try. And I think that's what we're talking about. What it looks like, who it is, where it lives, all that needs to be talked about in depth.
Mr. Hogan?
Have you guys seen anything in the last 5-10 years that could have been prevented by a position like this? Anything come to mind?
I'm not here.
It's been for a while.
I don't know about that, but I know in discussion what's coming and what has to be added, and it looks like in our quick discussion the other day, it looked like there's more, as Roger said, rules and regulations coming down, that each department might have to hire additional staff. And we're hoping to look at the grand picture. Actually, Roger and Melissa are hoping to look at the grand picture and see if we can find a way to handle all of that extra work with one person instead of.
He referred to it as like an IT. But I feel like it's more like a Phil Speedy over the work.
It's think of it as a safety. I'm thinking it was a safety officer. This is my vision of it. Safety officer for information and compliance.
Yep.
That's what I'm thinking of it as. And so right now, little parts of that are done. So when somebody gets a FOIL request for CPS records, can I release that? They call me. Or they might call the person at the state. This would be a single point of contact for that. Tim Hardy gets a request for a record. Some of it's releasable, some of it's not. And with particular people, he's pretty good. We've got him where he knows what to do, but he checks in with me, he checks in with Melissa, or if it's an IT thing, he'll check with Terry. So if we have this all centralized and one person knows all the rules, or one area knows all the rules, there's one point to go to. And have we avoided things through? We've done phishing campaigns. And so I don't know if we've avoided things. We've seen a big increase though in the number of calls since we started our cybersecurity program, and the level of skepticism, should I say, about emails and things like that. So I look at that as a success because first of all, before there was a cybersecurity officer, there's nowhere to go if he even thought about it. It wasn't really on anybody's radar. Now it's on people's radar through the training, the opportunity to have a single point of contact. And you do get calls, and some of them do pan out. We found, as a matter of fact, in several places, other organizations that have had problems, and we've had to contact them and say, we're getting emails from you, and these aren't right. And we told them, fortunately, it hasn't happened in our system, but we found it in other people's systems, and they emailed us, and our folks discovered it. So that kind of program works.
Yeah, I think it would take one save to take it. So.
I think I think as we're changing more to digital electronic files, you're gonna have more exposure. Mr. Shaw, I think I see a hand over there.
Yeah, I wasn't on that committee, so I didn't want to ask the question setting up there. My concern is that you bought another building a couple of years ago because we ran out of space. Then you went and started renting space in Hudson Falls a year ago. And now we're still talking about adding more people, and we've been working on discussions of building more space here. We want to be careful. Everything, there's a repercussion to it. And if you add another person, then you got to find a place for them. And I just caution you on moving too fast on this. How many lawsuits have we had to settle, Roger, on all these issues that we're so worried about? Okay, that's what I thought.
So the point of today was only to put it on the radar that this was a discussion that may happen in the fall. And it was just to let you know that they're looking into it, not that everything is gonna happen, just to make everybody aware, because if we hadn't, then the next thing would have been in the fall. Why didn't anybody say anything? So it's the very, very beginning. It's going very, very slow, and you get kicked in the teeth if you let you know that we're thinking about something. You get kicked in the teeth if you don't let somebody know you're thinking.
Well, I
about it.
just
So
wanted
it's
to
a
put
big-
more input into what you said, and I think that what you did is good. But just remember the space when you go into the fall, how you gonna deal with it.
Okay.
And then, in the meantime, cybersecurity is being taken care of. All the duties are being done that were being done before. We haven't lost anything by having this discussion. We're talking about maybe expanding the portfolio a little bit more and shifting some things around, but everything's getting done now. So this discussion doesn't detract from our activities now or make us any less than we were before.
Thank you. Anything else come before the committee? All in favor?
Aye.
Salary increase, sorry. Anything else? We're adjourned.
You had the extra.
I should say this right.
Yeah.
Don't sit next to it.
There's nobody in that spot. There's nobody in that spot. There's always one in between. All right, let's call the government ops meeting to order. First order of business is to accept the minutes from May 23rd. Moved by Dave, seconded by Dan. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Come on up, Matt. We don't want to keep you too long.
So everybody probably saw when you pulled in, the roof at the jail probably got a couple more weeks of finishing around the outside. They're pretty much done with the new roof on top, but just trim up, so it'll probably be a couple more weeks. It's fun, but it's not fun I'm gonna send around these. This is my discussion with the town of Fort Ann on the DPW barn about the property, so I figured I'd fill you in what we kind of settled on.
Well, that's being passed around. Is that normal, the age of the roof? Didn't it last longer than that?
So, the jail roof, we bought a warranty of 5 years when we built the jail, which isn't even legal to buy now. Like minimum warranty now is 25 years. So I don't know what we got for material with a 5-year roof. I think we got probably what we paid for when we got it. The best way I could, because when I said, oh, there's this many leaks, first thing I did is go down to archives, dug out the whole project, started getting the warranty information out, because today's standard is 25 years at the minimum. I'm like, oh, we'll get the material warranted at least, you know, through Firestone or whoever did the material. It was a 5-year warranty. So I don't know really, you know, what the quality of the,
Well, I'm probably
But the
the only
material
one that was here when that jail was built.
yeah.
And
I
I'm
can
not
hear
that-
you in my head going, we're not gonna spend extra money on this now.
No, and the thing of it is I don't think that could possibly been discussed, because I don't think anybody was on for it. It's something that's looked through somehow.
Yeah, I'm not
No, I'm just. I think it's
blaming
crazy.
anybody in particular.
5-year warranty is crazy. I
Um,
can't believe we did that.
So anyways, there was no warranty.
Thank you.
And in the material itself was really, it was degraded by the sun. I mean, it was just dry rotted and everything else, you know.
The upside, we
There
got
was one
15
time-
years out of a 5-year.
Yeah. Yeah, right. All right, so
Stretching for that, Pat.
what you're looking at here is kind of the same thing that you've seen right along with our DPW, other than to the left of our building was where the salt and the sand piles were all the materials were gonna be. The town of Fort Ann had asked to preserve space on the big lot for their future expansion down the road, which we discussed. So I went with Sam and his people, in the black boxed in area to the left bottom corner is what we'd like to end up with the town of Fort Ann. Gonna keep that. The rest of it will have to go into the town of Fort Ann and Washington County, and that's for the bonding purposes. I think in finance, be a month ago or something, we talked about this. In order to even bond money or whatever, it couldn't be on the town of Fort Ann's property solely. It had to be in both of our names. So that's approximately a couple acres there. I will work with Roger and Jeff Myers for the town of Fort Ann to get the land swap done. So basically, our property that's over there will go into a joint county and town. And we're gonna have to save out that box for whatever Sam or the town of Fort Ann wants to do in the future. It shows a building, and that was just basically to give them an idea of how big of a building would fit there, so they knew how much to save aside. And our material storage is gonna go behind our building instead of the
So just to clarify, it's everything to the left of the
Yeah.
dark line.
of the dark line, yeah, because I didn't want to print color for the one line for everybody. I mean, we can just explain it. So everything to the left, that bottom left-hand corner of the map, which is basically the southwest corner of the property, will be the town of Fort Ann. Everything else will be a joint town. And so that's our next step, is to start that process. All right. Any questions on Fort Ann before I move forward? Middle Falls, quick update, they're just starting to work on it. We probably in this next month, we'll have a meeting with the engineers just to go over the basic plan down there. Move on, 'cause that's all I got for that right now. Next, we're in the middle of engineering and getting ready to go out to bid for the St. Paul's roof, which is up on River Street Circle. It's a 3-story building that we own that leaps in. It's a project that's been going along, part of the capital project. I have a part of it that's $1,600. It's a hazmat survey that needs to be done. It has to be separate from that actual engineering because it's a third party to the hazmat. It's $1,600, so I'd like to, rather than pay for it out of buildings and grounds, let's do it out of the capital project. So I have the number, it's H125-1620-2040.40. I know you won't get that, but I'll send it to you.
What is it again?
It's a capital project line.
Oh.
It's a capital project line. So basically I need from contingency $1,600 added to that line to pay for that engineer. And we move that to finance.
Is that an asbestos thing?
Yep, they test for asbestos and any other hazmat.
Motion by Dan, seconded by Dave. Any further discussion?
There probably is asbestos there, so there'll be another
So this is what quantifies when they go to do the new roof. So when they put it out the bid, it'll be part of the job. If they don't disclose this, we go out the bid and then the contractor's gonna say, no, sorry, we can't do this, and then we're starting over. So this is what makes it part of the actual bid.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
So that goes to finance, and I'll get all the numbers, so you can have a resolution brought up before that. Then this just got brought up a few minutes ago, and it is the Burgoyne Avenue. This is for the con application, which is the architectural survey part for Department of Health. We've been going back and forth. At this point, we're going to need the architects for the Schedule 6 of this application to go into more detail of what we're building. Due to some updated regulations on airflow and stuff like that since COVID. I mean, they've been upgraded and everything. We're going to probably have to do something with the HVAC system. And while we're there, some handicapped bathrooms. You know, we talked about some of these projects. So in the capital project, I think it was for upgrades, like 150,000. We've kind of footnoted or budgeted or whatever, but this is just part of it. And this is going to get us the application in, the final part of it. And it's 48,300. And basically they have to draw the whole building. They have to show what we're going to do. It's not actually to go out to bid for the projects yet, but it's the detail that the state now wants. At first, they didn't want the detail. They just wanted a narrative of what we were going to do. Now they want to see the detail. So this is, a sizable amount. I kind of choked on it when I saw it, but it's what we need to do to be able to move forward. And I think we should update the building while we can, because it never gets cheaper, as we know that. We've done the roof. I think now's the time, especially for efficiency, the boilers are probably, I don't know how old they are, 50 years old. They're not breaking down or anything, but there's definitely more efficient out there. And then as far as getting airflow into the building, you could incorporate that project right in if you don't do that airflow. So
Can you summarize the numbers again that you said? What are we approving cost-wise?
So this, I'm asking for 48,300, and this is basically to finish the architectural survey for the building.
That's all that's getting us is the survey.
Well, they're laying it out, and they're laying out the narrative for the state, and basically in detail. This is the square footage of the bathrooms. It's drawn out. The next step will be whether my guys do the project or we hire it out, And then like the HVAC part of it, we will hire out, but we have to have it all done, for the finished application. So I'm looking to move, I think it was, I don't know, Al could correct me, whether we already had 150 set aside or it's part of contingency and it was just the budget number I put out there. I'd like to move to 48,300. I have the number. Again, which
There's 150 budget.
yeah. So I have the number. And it's budgeted in the capital plan.
We just need to transfer.
We need to transfer it. So the next step would be finance. But if you want to discuss that project, right now is the time. Just throw questions at me about the whole building. I know there is some. We don't have the nurses over there, the public health. The public health will fill up the building. We have used it for some other stuff. The sheriff ran out of secure storage. The only other vault we have in the whole county that we own is over there with concrete walls that's secure enough to hold evidence. So we're just fixed up a room for him because he's over full of evidence down there, like they have no place to keep it. That's off the gym. We're using that vault.
We should, I think one small national bacon forever. There's a big one.
Yeah. So
Al
Go
clarified
ahead.
that we only need to do the transfer in committee, we don't need to.
Don't need financing, we already have.
okay.
Budget's already in place for just moving.
The other one is in contingency at that, moment, right?
The 1,500 or
Yes, the
whatever.
1,600.
If you want to add that to the, you've got 22,000 in St. Paul's roof now.
I think that was the final, so I think that's already bookmarked for the engineering part of it, so
So that would.
we'd end up short.
Right, but you've got 150 budgeted for repairs, and renovations. So
That's already there,
it's
so
already there.
we can just do it here for this.
Yep, that's all you need.
I'll move it for discussion.
Okay,
Moved by Dave, seconded by Dan.
So my question is, we've been working on that building for years. I know there's COVID took apart, but how long are we talking about to get to the point where we can get permission to take public health over there? And what's gonna be the cost?
well, the total cost depends on the projects we decide to do. So I think the ones that we will absolutely have to do are like the updated bathrooms in the center and probably the airflow. I don't have a great cost for you right now, but I did do some figuring because this weighs on me as part of, you know, getting that building and everything, but and then now building DPW buildings that aren't even office buildings. Cost of what we have into the school right now is, I think, somewhere around like 1.18.
1.18.
I was gonna say 1.3, but approximately 1.18 for the amount of square footage, which is still pennies on the dollar. If we doubled that amount of money, which I'm not saying we are, but if we double the amount of money, we're still maybe a dime for every dollar of what it would cost us to build something of that size. So I'm still very comfortable 5 years later, or however long we did this, that it's still the best way to go. I don't regret, you know, I think about it a lot because during COVID, we couldn't do anything and it did get knocked back and I haven't moved people like I wanted to. I mean, it sits on my desk and it's just one of these ping pong balls. It seems like it's always out. A little bit comes back, I do what I need to, and then it goes back out. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think you should, I mean, this is my recommendation. You don't hit the abort button now. I think it's probably one of our better investments, you know, that building in the long run.
Dan.
That's just
Yeah,
my,
I'm not opposed to being a good investment, but my point is to have some idea for future what it's gonna cost us to wrap this program up. And I mean, there ought to be a number.
this is what, I'm getting very close to that number. This part of this is gonna really give me the project and it's gonna be, the Department of Health is gonna say, you gotta do this project, this project, this project. And then they're gonna approve the application.
And then you will have a number on what it's gonna cost.
That's when I will have a better
Public
estimate of what
Move
it's.
public health that we're going.
Yes, that's what I'm,
Okay.
and my, I mean, I was hoping by the end of the year. I don't see it happening. I have to depend on architects and engineers and their time schedule. I have to depend on the Department of Health's time schedule. So it's just not my time, and to be fair, it's my time schedule too. I mean, that's not like it's the only project I'm working on. You know,
If you
it's one
move
of
public
them.
health down there, and you've got board of elections down there, right? What else is down there? Anything?
For elections and code is there.
Code, right?
Yep. And we still use it for different events that the county use. We use the conference room.
Well,
We do
my point
voting
is,
there.
when you get all done, is do you have to factor in some type of a modified parking lot? Because now you're gonna have.
So we
Vehicles down
We
there. That gotta be
did
covered.
an extended parking lot already, which is
So you're
really,
covered on that point?
I'm not saying we're completely covered, we redo it, but we put a lot of parking spaces in there for the future. And right now, Meals on Wheels is also over there. So every car they have, you count too, because they have a personal car they drive there, and then they have the county car they get in. So they take up a lot of parking spots, and as you know, one of our other projects is trying to get them a building, back down where they were. Departments that just drive to work, they use one car. Departments that drive a county car when they get here too, so we'll revamp that. But I see right now, we have it stoned out around the back. It's paved for probably 3/4 of it, and then there's stone parking, out behind the gym. Are they using that? Yes. Down the road, would we want to pave that part of it for them, which would create some more parking? I don't doubt it. But I'm gonna keep trying to get all this stuff together for you.
Thank you.
Some of it's just out of my control when it comes back to me, and this is what you need to do. So I report to you as soon as I know.
David,
Sometimes.
you have a question?
That there's a new roof there. You talk about ventilation. Can the changes of ventilation be done with all the penetrations now, or are you gonna make more penetrations in the roof? Or are you gonna go to mini splits and then we have to seal all the
So-
penetrations?
But right now, remember, it is all mini splits. Mini splits don't give you outside air. They don't give you ventilation. There's even me being in the business, there's so much new technology on how to put air into buildings that I don't think the roof is going to be a problem. Okay. And anything, we would be getting rid of the penetrations from the mini splits. In a rubber roof, it's repairable. Like, it's not like, if we take it out, it's even better. We found down here, I was trying to get all the rooftops in before we put the new roof on. But I don't know, looking back, if that was a great idea either, because every time we were working up there and putting the new rooftops on, that old roof would start leaking. And once you got one leak, it just seemed like it would go like this. So every time we did them, so this last two that we're doing on this new roof, and we're gonna put it on, I feel actually more comfortable with that than the old roof, because the one time they were putting it up there, and it's nothing to do, it was just because of the traffic up there of working, there was 172 leaks. Check.
Any more questions for Matt? Okay, any further discussion? Voting on the motion for Matt to transfer his money for the engineering architectural study. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
172 weeks, that's almost
It was.
Yeah.
I mean, you forget how much time it takes to do, but not only the cost to repair it, the guys chasing the leaks and any equipment that was damaged. So, anything else before I head out?
Thanks, Matt. Stephanie?
Morning. What I'm bringing today, thank you, I'm glad Roger is here because he's gonna have a big say on this. When we were at conference, one of the big questions that came up this year is in regards to our electronic records that we keep within the county. So perfect time with IT and all the questions going around today. We have a couple different ways that we have authorization to destroy records. All our court records are done by the Office of Court Administration, so anything that comes in, they have to sign off on before we can destroy. So the question comes up on how to handle our paper records that we have that we are trying to get rid of. That's part of the digitizing process that we're doing with the grants and so forth. So at this point in time, I'm putting it out there, something that may want to be considered is a resolution, and this can be better talked about possibly with Roger and any concerns with that. The association is kind of split. Some feel that with the systems we already have in place, we're covered. Some of the counties feel that it's something that we should have a resolution done saying that the county records are the official records if they're digitized. I'm not sure Roger's thoughts on those or the board's thoughts on those. We have the archives regulations that we go by. We have the OCA regulations we go by. So it's something that's coming up in conversation across the state. So I felt that I needed to bring it here so that we can have the conversation or start a conversation to see which way the county is best going to be protected. Some counties did it years ago. I don't know as though we ever did anything with digitizing records years ago. So there is some concern out there. So I just want to put it out there for conversation. Some research to see which way we're going to be best protected with the digitized records, with destroying the paper records. Majority of our records now are coming in electronically. We do electronic through the courts. We do electronic through the records management, deeds, mortgages, power of attorneys, all those come in electronically now. So just trying to give some food for thought on something that came up in conversation at conference that I felt was important for us to examine.
When something does come in electronically, do you still print it?
No. No, it's automatically dropped into our IQS system.
Just to help me understand it, Stephanie.
Mhm.
I don't know which one would answer this question. You have public and private records, like court is private. That's
Some court, yes.
for most court or just some?
So.
Some.
Okay. Now, all the records you have, are they public records?
No,
They're not allowed to be seen by the public if it's,
Adoption records, for instance, are sealed, juvenile records are sealed.
well, I'm thinking that is court, see, and you're,
Well, not necessarily. So the presumption is, when you do records requests, its presumption is it's open unless there's specific statute regulation that says it's not. So you have to, so we could play, it's like a dartboard, you name a record and I'll tell you whether there's something against it. So it's easier to say everything's open unless there's something that specifically says it's closed. So yes, most of our records are public.
and that's the ones that you digitalized and you want to destroy them or they're allowed to be destroyed, is what you're saying, the public record.
That's going to be the question. You want to go ahead and destroy them and then say this is going, the new official record is going to be
what
the
is
digital
digitized.
record.
Right, but
So the paper's destroyed, but we still have the record, but it's a digital version
right,
as
yeah,
opposed
yeah,
to
okay, I got that.
the paper
So
part.
how protected are these records after they're digitalized? The paper? I mean, if you threw them in a box, put them in the cellar and they got water stained and you couldn't read them in 10 years, are we liable for anything or is this, it's more of a space issue is what it is?
Well, there's a space issue, yes, which is one of the reasons why I'm doing the grants and getting rid of some of the stuff to give more space in our, well, in the basement as well as the vault upstairs.
So many of them don't even get to her as paper.
Correct.
A lot of court records, you don't, the only original document is the one sitting in whoever filed it electronically his office. It never gets there. Some of these records, you got to remember, have been digitized. Deeds, for example, before there was digital, there was photography and microfiche, and we never had the original. It always went back to the,
You know,
so we never kept it. So court records were all paper until, now we're scanning court records and things like that. So they're all in different formats. The question is, do you want to pass something and not have to look into the tubes? I'm not familiar with it. And we come up at my association conference as to what do you want to do? You want to say this is the official record. Now, when Stephanie hands out a copy, she's not going to give the official record now. She's going to make a copy of it and she's going to write on it, this is an official copy. So
Right.
there's really not that much of a difference as to what she's already doing.
Sam,
This
falls under the conversation we had earlier about risk management.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm having a flashback here.
That's why I said it was pretend that it came up.
It's another good example of some of the stuff we're talking about, and what are the various pros and cons of doing it.
Dana?
Stephanie, for a deed, it says it's a library page number. Is there still, if it's all electronic, is there
No, we
still a
do not.
library page number?
We do not have library page number anymore. We have instrument numbers. And the old records that are library and page are still searchable that way. So we can search both ways now.
Okay, when you go into the office down where all the deeds are, you got all those books,
Mhm.
you can look it up. There's nothing modern, no modern deeds because they're now electronic.
They're all on those computers that are now in there.
I just worry about what happens if, you go back to the Stone Age and there's no electricity. I guess people won't care about coming here anyway for paper.
A lot of the ones that we have now on those computers, we never had a paper copy for. Because they came in over the internet.
Very wisely left before we had this discussion, so that your issue is her issue. Backup storage, making sure that we can cybersecurity. Making sure they can be retrieved, not corrupted.
So we want to continue this discussion for
Well,
another month.
I would suggest what we do, unless there's a vehement opposition to continuing the scanning to its logical conclusion, is get together a small group of people, probably Terry would be one of them, myself, probably the administrators, and she has a reply, and Stephanie, and sit down and talk about what are the various systems, what are the ways to do this, what are the costs, if we need new systems, I don't know if we might need new computer hardware, software, or whatever, to do that, and then come back and you say, this is what we propose, this is how it would work, and then we'll adopt the resolutions and authorizations necessary to do it if you want to do it.
I have a question about how it would actually happen practically with the paper. We have shredders here. Does it get shredded? Does it go to the burn plant? Do we rent that big truck that comes and they shred things? Now, a lot of these documents are public. Probably don't have to be shredded, but probably just gonna shred everything. Anyway, how do you handle the old paper that you're getting rid of?
We do a secure burn at the trash plant.
All right, so you don't shred it. You just take boxes and they burn it.
Yes.
And there are some records, you get paper copies, you can't dispose of paper copies, even though they're digitized. Don't remember that conversation.
Yes, there are certain records, and if we have like confidential envelopes, we do not destroy those because we don't know what's inside. They're sealed from the judges. Certain maps that we can't scan in, those are down there. Those are in separate boxes, all labeled. And it's about an eighth of what we have in the original storage of what we got rid of. So we will have to have some paper stuff because we can't open the judge's files for the confidential and we can't put those onto the system. All we can show is that there's an envelope if the judge ever has an order to open them.
So that would continue with it.
Correct.
Judge orders sealed, coming over, can digitize those.
Right.
Okay, so I guess we'll stay tuned on this. Any more to come?
Yeah, risk management. Like,
Thank you.
Thank you. For other business, Sue and the Salem Economic Committee has requested time this morning, so that is next up on our agenda. Oh, Roger has requested we slide one thing in for him first.
So since the agenda notice went out, I've been approached by an Albany Law School student who'd like to do an academic internship in my office. Or at least looking at it. So pursuant to the internship policy, I have to bring it to my committee. Would be no pay academic internship, 35 hours a week. I think it's the minimum. So basically that's his class for his last semester of law school. We're required to be the supervisors. I do have an approved internship program through the Health Division. We're conducting one this summer, as you know. She's going back to school in White Plains in the summer. So I think this is could do two things for us. One is get some experience for a lawyer, but also since he graduates in December, it might be an opportunity for a position like that for a while. But at this point, we're not looking too far ahead. There's no problem for us in doing supervision as we go to court anyway. One more person going along doesn't matter, and since it's academic, it's no pay through Albany Law School. And I've reviewed their handbook and everything, and I don't have a problem. It's not really a lot of work on our part, it's a lot of work on his part, keep track of what he does and everything, and having to report out to his academic advisor. So barring any objections, the policy doesn't say that he has to vote on it. It just says information is provided for you, both the oversight committee. So,
Anyone have any questions for Roger?
Yeah. Stop listening when you say that. You got it.
What?
CA citizen?
Okay,
Is he a citizen? Yes.
Alan
Why
has
does
a
it
quick
matter?
comment.
He's from Washington County. He doesn't currently live in Washington.
Part of it.
What is enough work?
Oh my gosh, Al has the floor, so all your comments.
I second that motion.
So while we were sitting here this morning, I got an email from the state. They've informed me that Laura's request for state aid on the assessing services has been approved. The reimbursement, however, now is 69.93%. It's not the dollar parcel. So we'll still be receiving $8,996.49. So I wanted to let you all know that we have that to offset the cost of the assessing. And I wanted to thank Laura for taking a stab at it because it was unknown whether we would qualify when she submitted. So it has been approved as of this morning for the services provided to Argyle, Fort Anne, Hampton, Cambridge, Granville, and Heath. So just wanted to kind of let you all know that.
Your county or the town?
This is the county limit that we took a stab at and we were successful. So wanted to thank Laura and advise you all.
Dana?
It was kind of odd. I got a letter from Real Property, the state, and it lists all the towns that are at full value assessment. And there was a decrease in towns that were 100% assessed. There's now fewer. And I wondered why, if we're doing this.
Ours dropped from 100 to 90 last year.
We redeveloped 2 years ago.
We went from 100 to 98. It's really up to your assessor. You know, if you talk to Laura, there's a 5% that you can take on your assessment of the town. If the town doesn't take the 5%, you know, they're going at what their opinionated assessment is.
There's some towns that I couldn't tell either they're too high or too low by like 14-15%.
Well, I can tell you, Fort Anne, we anticipated we were going to be at 100% right up until the very end. And we went from 85% down to 75%. And the logic behind that, according to the state, what they said back was the difference in lake properties and all the other things that are taking place during COVID. So that's where we're at.
Market sales is what people pay for houses, right?
Right. Yeah.
Decreased assessment for us.
So
Is that because you can't keep on top of the rise? It's just too fast.
It's still going to northern part of the county. 20% more than we
because we're
100.
because you're still.
A neighbor of mine just bought a property, a little tiny parcel. Went for 20,000 more than the asking price. And it's tiny. Yeah, I just can't believe it.
That's kind of bunch of real estate agents. You just need
Okay.
property sold way above.
All right, anything else until we get through the floor with our committee? Go ahead, Sue.
This is Bob Berger and I'm a board from Retirement Development Committee. They'll.
First guy gets the chair.
Good or bad? It's a rough crowd. And it's a Salem here.
What's that?
It's a Salem, okay? So.
That's right. They're all
It's worse than that. It's a Hamlet of shoe.
Oh, with that, isn't there a bridge that goes there?
Yes.
Oh,
Brand new one. Thank you.
With lights, Dana.
We live live anyway. Yeah. Required eminent domain.
Yeah, really.
I believe that's probably.
You did.
Yeah, no.
Okay, guys, please give your attention.
All right, so you have in front of you some maps and a letter that we have crafted. We're part of the Economic Development Committee, Town of Salem. There's kind of a unique situation. We think it's unique. It's the Charles Link properties that are both in Shushan and in Salem. Charles Link was kind of an entrepreneur in the 1950s. Over the years, he expanded Shushan Bentwood into the town of Salem, where he had 2 mills where he sawed his logs and provided support for his main mill, which was in Shushan. Chuck was of German descent. He imported a lot of the woodworking tools, computerized, to allow him to make furniture bends. So he had a unique monopoly, reached out all across the country to different furniture manufacturers to supply bins, the chair bins for them. The 7 properties that Chuck owned, both in Shushan and Salem, had been abandoned for 16 years. Chuck had a son by the name of Charles. He had a pro bono attorney file bankruptcy every 3 years, seemingly when the taxes came due. This year, the Washington County attorney was able to procure, my understanding, 6 of the 7 properties for the county. The 2 mill sites in Salem, which is our main focus today, would be a great fit for the dewatering site if the sewer district referendum is approved in November. So the town is working diligently with Delaware Engineering to move this project forward. It's providing the sewer district for this historic little village would be a boon to business opportunities. As you know, Southern Washington County, we don't have major highway infrastructures. And everybody's aware that in Washington County, we compete with Saratoga's racetrack, Warren County's Lake George. What we do have is agriculture in the Battenkill River Valley and what I call quaint. And when I say quaint, we can draw upon cottage industries and people who work remote. I myself work for a fuel cell company south of Pittsburgh, sit in the village of Shushan. So that opportunity does exist to bring in new tax revenues to the town and the county. What we need to do is focus on where we can and have access to is removal of dilapidated properties. It would be a win-win for both the town and the counties. So our ask is consideration to pull the 2 Link properties on Vale Street in Salem from the planned auction and consider a donation of those 2 properties to the town of Salem, depending upon the November referendum. We also understand from the treasurer of the county that there's an EPA lien in excess of $200,000 on both properties. And if there is an EPA point of contact that the county has, that would be helpful to us to have conversations around that. So that in a nutshell is our ask, that we hold putting these 2 properties on Vale Street in Salem, pull them from the potential July auction until we have a referendum vote in November on the sewer district.
And the thing about, it's interesting about this property is you probably couldn't pick a better spot for a dewatering site. Because if you look at the map, it actually butts up against the old rail line. And the rail line goes right up by the school. And of course, the school would be the largest user of a sewer system. So you wouldn't have to dig roads up and there's discussions about getting that property also. So, yes.
Is that portion of the rail line still active? Or
No.
part that jumped out of?
That's been abandoned for, got to dig rails up.
Yeah.
No. There's actually discussion about walkway.
There is, we have the community pedestrian loop that we're working on. The property is owned by Northeast Rail. And also we have the same park recreation. Am I getting this right, Lori? Empire State Development. And so there's multiple owners that we're trying to figure out at this point. Looking at the CFC possibly purchasing the Northeast Rail part, or we'll see. They're getting appraisals done on it.
Bob,
I don't think I would oppose this pulling at this point, just to give us some time to think about this, but back in, I'm trying to think back, and I can't see on the map here, but isn't there a brook that runs right through there, the Beaver Brook, the Beaver Brook run right through that? Does that not mitigate against making a watering site?
It's,
Have you done engineering? Is there any engineering background to this? It's wonderful spatially, but is it wonderful physically as a watering site? Wouldn't want to get going on this whole thing and have, you know, DEC say, yeah, no.
DEC is very involved with Delaware Engineering. They have reviewed the site. It is 11.3 acres. And so the water treatment, town water treatment is actually to the side of that. And so to come down, they've you know, done soil samples, they looked at the Beaver Creek. It's not agricultural land, which is always an issue. And you don't want to do that with the water. So but those questions have been delved into even before we came together, because it's a
As long as
really
that
important,
background's been done.
but that background has been done on it.
It's amazing why they put, you know, water treatment and septic plants right side by side everywhere they do it. An interesting phenomenon.
Virtually opposite, but.
Yeah.
I never got DEC involved, but I have a question.
Yes,
Have you talked to Army Corps of Engineers who oversees this, having extensive experience over the past 3 years in litigation? Waters in the United States, have they been involved?
let me ask Mary Beth. I'm sure that,
I would suggest you do, because they put the ball.
They just got whacked pretty bad too. It's lots of big stuff.
I will, Dave, send her up a text. And
So what,
5 years.
and I don't know if we can answer this.
I see you, Jim. I'm calling you next. You got me.
What is the, or Al probably, but what is the back taxes on this property?
219,000.
And what's the value of it? And that's 3 years, right? Interest and penalties. Is there a value on
No,
it
that's actually.
from assessed value?
It's 11 years.
11 years?
They would pay taxes in 2012.
But is there an assessed value on this property?
Yes,
On both?
there are two properties. Assessment on one is 200,000. Assessment on the other is 225.
so
Assessment.
Is this,
That's the assessment.
it's two properties or one property in red? It's two properties.
It's two parcels.
This is subscription.
Jim,
That's sale.
Question for Al, where are we at with the state's determination on whether we can move forward with the auction this year?
So last time I checked on the bill, which was Sunday, lakeside, I noticed that it had passed the Senate and been sent to the Assembly. But I think they're back in special
They're in
session.
session today and tomorrow, so
If the
Okay.
Assembly passes it, it'll go to the governors.
Okay.
I
we're in
don't
limbo.
know.
Yeah, okay.
It did pass the Senate.
so it could go into moratorium.
So the moratorium is for things that we've taken after July 1st. So we already own this property. The moratorium won't cover this one. However, the wrinkle in this one and all future ones possibly, we recently had conversations about a policy of donating property. The recent Hennepin decision may squash that completely, because I can see where a former property owner would argue that now that you have to share the surplus with me, you didn't give me a chance to have a surplus because you donated the property. We may no longer be able to do that. We may be forced to auction every property so that the owner has an opportunity for his or her surplus to be evaluated. So Hennepin may put a wrinkle in our generous donation of properties immediately. So anybody who got in the wrinkle first benefited, but going forward, I don't know that if challenged, I don't know that we would.
I think that still applies to things we already do too. to be quite frank, because we haven't sold it yet.
Correct.
So when Hennepin came down, there's two things going on here. One is the Supreme Court says surplus has to be returned to the property owner. We're not going to tell you how to do that. That's up to the state. Second thing is the state has to figure out how that's going to happen. But in the meantime, as Al said, there's an argument now that case has come out of Minnesota that how do you know if there's going to be a surplus? The only way you really know is if you auction it. And if there's not, then there's not. But if there is, and the property owner is going to come in and say, well, I've got 2 parcels assessed at least minimum assessed at, which we just had a prior discussion, as you recall, but the assessment doesn't mean anything. It's property selling for way more than the assessed value. So the only pure way to find out what the surplus would be to take it to an auction and do that. And then the surplus, how the surplus gets distributed, if there is a surplus, remains to be seen. And right now, what their moratorium is saying is you just have to put it on hold while the legislature figures out how to distribute it and who's going to have a bite at it and all the rest of that stuff, which is going to be real exciting.
And again, this is a new wrinkle a month ago.
Right.
This would have been a different conversation.
Right. 4 weeks ago, we would not, that we would have said, go ahead and make your decision, board.
Yeah.
But now I'm saying that you may not have that decision.
There's a couple of other thoughts on this. They did have in New York State restore New York that just came out. This site has about 10 buildings that are dilapidated, falling apart, health safety concerns with roof and everything else. Actually, all building properties except for the post office. Okay, but it's not quite. I think the last auction bid got up to 22,000 on the one parcel.
I don't think we were in that. I don't think we got that high much total.
So then I think it got pulled about 5 minutes before the auction came due.
Day before.
And so, and the other issue is all these buildings have stuff in them, lots of stuff, lots of machinery, lots of stuff. And that's not owned by the county. And it won't be owned by the new owner. From what I understand is that actually you have to contact that owner and say, you've got 10 days to get out things.
Our foreclosure does not include any personal property.
And the personal property in these are machines bigger than that table. Some are folded down, some are not folded down. So it's going to be an interesting thing. There's an old kiln, there's an old factory. There is all kinds of stuff in all the buildings. House and clean out the garbage, which is great. But there are properties that have been headache for Washington County and for the town of Salem. I'm hoping we can do something with them. I know you got a request for the Shushan Comic Bridge Museum. Those 2 parcels that are on the Natural River, one is on the Jackson side, and one's on the Salem side, of course. The bridge now, so. But, what can you do with it? Somebody from California buy it, but they put composting toilets or something on there, which is not going to help anybody. Right now, they're landlocked.
But importantly, you didn't have a choice, and you couldn't give away any of those properties. You have to go to auction.
The conversation would have been much easier a month ago. It really would have.
So we have to stay tuned, I guess. And see what happens, and then figure out whether it is that would best work for everyone.
And the other factor in here is, I understand what you're saying, obviously you can't decide now, but you say, what's the value? Well, from what I heard, people come to Salem and they say, oh, looks like a great place, let's put a business in there. Where's your sewer system? Oh, you don't have one, oh, see you. That's it. So it's very important, I feel it's very important if we can somehow get this property, these properties, that it would be a huge, huge leg up to get the sewer system in and help the community as a whole, because it's just, if you have a restaurant, forget it. You can't do anything anymore. And forget about your property values. If you're going to go and try to sell your house, and you're going to have to spend $30,000 on a sewer system if you can put it in.
We do understand that, but the laws, we can't change them.
The good news is we're not saying no.
Right. It's just, it's just.
If there is a bright side,
I'm
that's the
saying
bright
hold
side.
on and wait.
Right.
So any sense.
So there, again, there's two things going on, so as far as Hennepin goes, though, one of the things that could be possible, so Hennepin just deals with the surplus, right? So if we feel like to protect the owner and the county, you know, we are forced to send the property to auction. If you auction the property and it brought 10,000, and you could prove there was not a surplus, then you may have options. Now you've proven at a fair market that there was no surplus to the owner. So there'll be conversations that we can have once we know more, but right now this decision is really, really new. And when they come back into session today, the legislature can change everything in one vote. So even if they don't pass the moratorium, we're gonna have to deal with that. One of the possible remedies under Hennepin would be to prove that there is no surplus. There's a significant tax lien on these properties. So there's, as Roger said, it's not a no, but it can't be a yes, yeah.
That's wicked speculation.
Yeah,
So at
I'm
this,
not an attorney, by the way.
And your attorney's not gonna speculate.
I have Laura first and then you.
So just a quick follow-up to Father Dave's comment on the system design. So I'm not sure in terms of engineering, like where the proposed speedies permit would have discharged, but as I understand it, conceptual design on the system has been done, but you can't do final design until you have an actual system. So as Sue was saying, DEC has been preliminarily involved, but you wouldn't have the final investigation on all those issues until you had final design, and you can't do that until you have design. So it does, I mean, absolutely, we are limited to what the law says. But Salem is then gonna have to make a decision as to whether to pursue other sites or to sit tight and wait and see what happens with the law here.
right now, we're working carefully with the school and also with Hudson Headwater. If down the road that it should happen, school is going forward and Hudson Headwater is going forward. But to make sure placement of engineered design is in keeping with if municipal sewer is passed by public works. So they are going forward even if we don't have municipal sewer, but they would like to key into it and are planning to. So right now we have businesses that, I mean, there's many small business owners here. We have people that put money into buildings and do great things. And it's more of a community service because they can be only 12 hours a week. And if you run a small business, it's important to remember that how much profit margin you can have if you can only do 12 hours a week. The one Mexican restaurant has been told by Ag Market to be arranged that yes, they can open, they can do takeout, but they have to pump their septic tank every month. So that's what's going on. So everybody is adapting to what we have to do. It's not fun, but they're still putting money into it and still offering things to the community. And so I think probably this discussion will follow after we hear back from the state on where we are at this point.
Do you know who? Oh, sorry, I forgot. Did you still have a comment you wanted?
Yeah, what happened, so the property, what was the outstanding tax rate?
219.
So somebody, if we did go to auction on the property, 220, we have to just give that $1,000 to the state. That property.
To somebody. We don't know how that's gonna work. We can't keep it, I guess is the better way of saying it. It has to go not to us.
But then it's free and clear, but that the proceeds of that sale make the county whole on the 219 portion.
If you're about 220, yes, sir.
So that's why we don't know whether or not we would. Yeah, that's what we have to know. We don't.
Yes.
We're not gonna make a bid on themselves.
That's my speculation.
What's your last?
It's not just a matter of donating, but we would end up needing 250,000. Salem has no storm drains, surface drains.
Because the problem we have in Washington County is they're commingled, whenever it rains, it overflows the Hudson River. You don't have anything like that. So there really wouldn't be a risk of anything overflowing into Beaver Creek because you don't have any storm drains feeding sewer. It's a brand new design with zero connection.
Beaver, it comes from the north towards the village. So, and usually any flooding we have is on Lake Creek, which is south, further south of that area. So I don't think so.
Yeah, that was taken into
There's always a
consideration.
discharge sometime from one of those plants.
But they're looking
Although
at,
with deep water goes somewhere. But you're not gonna have a huge dump when it rains, you've got to.
That's, you want to bypass.
Any other questions?
thank you.
Once we have that,
Thank you.
No, thank you for your time, appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I forgot. Look at him, sorry. All right, now we have to give our attention to our esteemed administrator. She has two others. You can't even comment. Why were you looking at stuff lakeside? You don't even deserve to have a lakeside camp. If that's what you're gonna do. Really? I would not think about working at all about sitting on the lake. Which will be next week. Don't even ask. In theory.
It was the only day it wasn't raining.
I know, I think it's forecasting rain for 3 days and then we're gonna have to. Sorry, you're doing it anyway. There's no such thing as a vacation.
Okay, so the first item I have, is on the subject of office supplies. And I apologize for the handout I just gave you, and I think ahead of time I didn't have it. But our purchasing coordinator was able to get 3 quotes. Actually, yeah, 3 other quotes on office supplies, and that's what I just handed to you now. So the issue that is occurring is currently the office supplies that we purchase off of New York State contract, and we get them from Staples. That contract is actually expiring June 30th. So our purchasing coordinator was able to find out that there are items actually available through Staples through Sourcewell, which, as you know, with all of our conversations of recent months, in order to purchase items off of Sourcewell, we need to have adopted our best value into our purchasing policy, which is what we had just recently done. So the quotes that I gave you show that Staples is well beyond, or well below the prices of the other companies that are often used for the same items. The items that are listed are normal stockroom items that we have, as well as some toners at the bottom that are commonly used around the county offices. So because we're utilizing best value through Sourcewell, I am requesting to go ahead and do this and purchase these items from Staples. But in order to do that, I do need a Board of Supervisor resolution at the next meeting.
Dana, I know. Seconded by Dave.
Sourcewell is just a consortium, right?
Yes.
Any other discussion? Dana?
Just last week, my town clerk had noticed that Staples supplies have increased a little bit, so she compared it with WB Mason because she sees the truck here in the county quite often. And she was shocked at how much more WB Mason was. She said, "Oh my goodness, how can the county buy stuff from them?"
And then I was surprised also when I saw the comparison yesterday that, you know, there is such a significant difference, which is why obviously we would like to be able to continue using Staples for those items that we use so much of on a daily basis.
How does Staples ship their stuff? Not coming on a Staples truck outside, right? It's being, coming here through whether FedEx, UPS, or.
I don't even want to try to speculate.
We got it in the town hall the next day.
Yeah, it does come very quick,
I don't know.
very quick.
That's on. They probably have the distribution.
Amazon truck, right?
Combination.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Any question? on
Wow,
what's
this
the
is the
site
record
cost?
for you, Melissa. What do you got for the next
I-
thing?
What, we have a budgeted item, or this is probably every department has it, I think.
They have office supply line. Yep.
So this will undercut what we budget quite a bit, hopefully. It's gonna be less.
Not necessarily, it's actually the same price of the items that we purchased this year. So I don't know how we compare to the year before, if prices went up this year compared to what was budgeted, so that I can't answer. But the prices that are here now are what they've been all year, so I don't expect any savings from what we're used to. Good news is, we're not gonna be spending more.
Less
than
of an
what we
increase.
expect. Yes, less.
Okay, next item.
Next item, I'd like to bring up the subject of Juneteenth. It's not something I've brought to committee in the past, but given the fact that yesterday was Juneteenth, and I've received several inquiries from departments and employees, and the personnel office has as well, I would like to bring the subject of Juneteenth forward to the committee to see what your thoughts are as far as whether this is a recognized holiday for the county and a day that it is actually closed. It has been brought up in all of our negotiations with unions. CSEA, PBA, NISNA, Teamsters, in those negotiations, we have just told them that if the county recognizes this as a holiday where the offices are closed, then that will be extended to them as well, and that would have to be through an MOA. But as of right now, I have not brought this up, but I would like to bring it up at this time. As you know, it's a recognized state and federal holiday. And you saw yesterday, all the banks were closed. Post office was closed. Warren County has declared it a closed holiday as of yesterday as well. That was their first time. So I don't know.
I think until towns, the majority of towns recognizes for their workers, we should. The unions are always gonna want more money to work less. That's what this is about.
Town agreement recognized last year. Starting last year.
You
Any
have a- are
comment,
you-
Dan? You
is your
have?
highway union? Highway, so you didn't have to negotiate that?
My town clerk declared it a holiday and informed me. Too late. Put it on the web page, Facebook, and it was over with. I couldn't believe it.
She did what?
She declared it a state holiday in both town office.
When did you lose control of her? Like 13, 14?
Your daughter? Yeah, your daughter.
That's
You
right.
control for 6
Good luck,
months.
good luck with that.
I think.
Chairman?
I think the Town Clerks Association recommended that the town clerks close, but mine did the same thing. Which I found out as I was on my way to work yesterday. In spite of being admonishments about my incredible liberalism, I do think we stand a little bit of danger of appearances. All sorts of things people could say about you if you don't recognize Juneteenth. Is I am strongly against proclaiming these things national holidays, but I think that it diminishes the import of it. I think, for example, Sam's practice of taking the veterans, on the day, not on the holiday. We've got the federal regulations saying that all these holidays will be held on one day, so federal employees can have more time off, just like Dana said. I think that, for example, Martin Luther King Day, I think has been degraded to a nice time to have a picnic and do some family things. I think that loses the importance of what it's intended for, and I think this will do exactly the same thing. But I think the optics of it are pretty terrible if we don't do it. And I also think that it is, and I perhaps find a little disagreement around the room, but I think that this is also a point of negotiation. If we're giving another holiday, I think that ought to be part of our union negotiation.
And it actually already was. Whatever union that we have negotiated But it was part of the negotiation process and it's in their contracts.
So they'll get it on.
It was considered when we negotiated, yeah. Dave,
How many holidays do you like?
it varies depending on union, non-union. I would estimate 11, in most cases, some more, some less, depending on where you were.
I think there's 11 federal holidays. Maybe now 12.
Used to be, and they gave one, sometimes they took one away. Jim?
I didn't have a
Oh, I
question.
thought
I'm
you
good.
could hand up.
Nope.
Dave?
I'm with Bob. I think that if we don't do it, that lives out there for everyone. I think we get more and more pushback from unions and employees on this, as more and more counties start getting started. And while I'm not for keeping on having national holidays, because we'll be working 10 days a year and have 300 days of holidays, I think this is a unique one. We really should consider doing.
I think it's a terrible holiday because it celebrates actually waiting a year to tell the slaves they were free. That's terrible. You don't celebrate that.
They celebrate, but it's been celebrated for the past 150 years, almost.
Sam?
I think that what Bob was referring to is that Vietnam Veterans of America, we had a service up at SUNY Adirondack every year for the Vietnam vets in the area, 53 of them that had passed away. We've done it for 30 years as a traditional memorial because that's what we wanted to be focused on, is them. Having said that, I think that as we move on, if this is a federal holiday, I think that our employees should be entitled to that day. I think that while we show productivity that day because they're not working, it's not cost us any more to give them that holiday. It's not like we'll put more money in. And I'm sure that it does not exceed or run into extra overtime expenses for them to catch up on the things that they can't process anyways because the state and the feds are closed.
Well, there is some cost because we have employees that have to work, sheriff's department, dispatchers, this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And they are then getting additional holiday pay.
That's true.
So there is some cost. I'm not sure I can quantify it. Maybe I'll probably off the cuff, but I think we all could quantify it. I'm not sure the level of it. It's probably, I would guess, probably in the range of maybe $20,000. Maybe not that much.
I think that's probably. Yeah, the only other thing, I was gonna say, I apologize.
Well, Dave, nice hand up, we can back
Okay.
here.
I was
Thank
just
you.
going to suggest we have 4 people here, Washington Fire this committee. I would suggest we move this along to larger committee, finance, or whatever, because I think you have 4 supervisors make that decision.
It would
Yes
need
or
to
no.
go to the full board.
Yeah, send it
as
to the
well.
send it to the board, spend 20 minutes. there.
Well, if you're gonna move, then you better get support out of this committee, because I'm not gonna support a move for something I don't support. And any committee can take up anything, and everybody can say, oh, no, it belongs there. If it comes out of another committee, it's done. It gets on the board or floor. I mean, not that I'm opposed to it or support it, I'm just saying that I don't want to do something just so somebody else can do something. I mean, if we feel strong about it, we do it. If we don't feel strong about it, then I don't think we should. And I don't know how I feel. I have to go ask my daughter.
You know,
We know how she feels.
What I was suggesting is
Excuse
use
me.
the conversation.
Dana has
Excuse me,
the
I have the floor.
floor.
I think governing because of our concern of optics is not governing. Politics. Now,
What he was explaining about politics.
Okay, Melissa remembered what she was doing,
Yeah,
then I'm
yeah,
coming back to you, Dan.
I did.
It's like skiing.
So,
He's shushing up.
this holiday is celebrated. It's the 3rd Saturday of the month of June. So it would always be the Monday following. Okay, so it would be a Monday holiday. And one of the items that did come up yesterday was because the banks are closed, post offices are closed, some of our business that we normally conduct, I wouldn't say we don't have other things to do, because we do, and the things that were supposed to be conducted yesterday would be conducted today. But it does cause a little bit of hardship as far as conducting business, because so many businesses are closed.
Got Dan and then Bob.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dan.
The more I listen to this, I'm gonna share my thoughts on it. I'm opposed to any more holidays. I think there's plenty of holidays to go around. But on the same token, I have to say, if the state and federal government declares it a holiday, who are we as little peons to try to say, no, we're gonna ignore that? I mean, we're so integrated with the state and federal government. I don't know if we have any options, as you have discussed, for us to function normally. I think we gotta go along with it, although I don't agree with it. And I don't like it, but it's probably the right way.
Exactly what your daughter was telling you yesterday.
Chairman?
And I think Dan summed it up pretty well. I think there's one other thing that, and I'm not gung ho for it, as you maybe have noticed. But I think one other thing we gotta look at is kind of a thing for our employees too, because not only are banks and things, the schools are closed, people got all kinds of daycare issues, and stuff. We're probably gonna lose a lot of people to, personal leave or sick leave or something that day anyway. I think our effectiveness is probably gonna be diminished. Like Dan says, if the state and feds are doing it, I think, just make logistics sense.
Were the schools closed?
Yes.
Yes.
See, then that's tough, it's the younger kids that were still in school that the parents have to deal with.
And so I had a chance to go away over this past weekend, yesterday. Every hotel was booked, whether you're in Lake George, Lake Placid, Saratoga. There was a full-on extra holiday for hospitality.
Dan?
Those are all better arguments than worrying about the optics of how we move.
I never took any options. In fact, if we could, I'd eliminate birthdays.
It's already been done. Actually, yes.
I hate birthdays being a holiday for people.
You don't want to see that one roll around.
Well, that didn't happen.
That's because you're close to the retirement number.
Nope, I want them to keep coming. I want as many of them as I can get.
All right, so then what's coming out of this committee is the decision to move it on to another committee where there's a bigger group, or are we
Give it a shot.
sending it to
Send
the
it up
full
for a
Where
board?
does it go from here to the full board?
You have 4 votes, you need 4 votes to do anything.
I'll make a motion.
Send it to the board? So I have a motion by Dan,
I'll
Dave,
second.
seconded by
Already
Dan.
stated by the day.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
I
Opposed?
Nay,
just want to feel that.
I got goosebumps.
That's all I have.
Motion failed.
For now.
For now.
Okay. Anything else? Do I dare ask to come before the committee? I'm still only a little over an hour because IT ran
What
long.
was your focus on this matter as you saw it?
Zach, how about? I am irritated as hell by it, but I would have had to vote yes because everybody else is doing it. And there's no way to, but I'm irritated by most holidays. Yeah.
We don't have holidays.
I don't have holidays, so I'm irritated by it.
An individual can sponsor a resolution in front of the board too. The individual supervisor. So anybody that wants to bring it
Fill in
to
the
the board.
space.
Take it over to Abby, we'll send it. You'll sponsor it? You'll sponsor it? Okay, I'll write them up.
Somebody else.
Yeah, that's it.
If I was writing my own, can't you write your own?
What's happening?
Not with someone else offering.
And I already did it.
You want to sponsor it, Sue?
Whereas.
Sue?
In the meantime.
Whereas optics don't matter, let's see, what's the other one? Whereas.
I think you're doing committee action outside of the committee. I protest.
We are now going into committees for the Ag Planning and Tourism for June 20th. First order of business is to accept the minutes from the May 23rd meeting, 2023. So moved by Dave, second by Sam. All in favor, say by saying aye. Aye, opposed, carries. All right, first piece of business is broadband RFP responses.
So as should probably be not surprising, it's complicated. Out of the, just to give you a quick recap, we had about 881 addresses on the RFP that were separated out into 14 different service areas that vendors were allowed to bid on any number of them or all of them.
I did.
Verizon contacted us shortly before the responses were due and declined to provide a response because they said they could not be anywhere near cost effective. So we got 2 responses, one from Slick Networks and one from Spectrum. There was only one service area in which bidding crossed over. Other than that, the 2 entities bid for totally separate areas. The service area where both of them bid on happened to be Hampton and a portion of Granville. The issue is there were then 4 service areas that nobody bid on at all. So there is no way at this point to get a final determination of a cost to get all of those unserved areas served because we're lacking information on 4 of the areas. Second thing.
Yeah, what were the other areas? Thanks, Dan.
One of them was 2 addresses up in Putnam. One of them was a section of Argyle. One of them was a section of Granville, and one of them was White Creek. So in total, there were out of the 881 addresses, we got bids on 690 of them and no bids on 191 of them. And I want to remind you that in addition to those approximately 900 addresses, we have about another 600 addresses that were isolated as potentially serviceable by fixed wireless. And those are the addresses that we were going to deal with separately with the USDA funding. But there are other things to resolve there as well. But the addresses that were deemed potentially serviceable by fiber, the bottom line is we don't have enough information to make a decision as of yet. So I've done a couple of things. I have reached out to both Spectrum and Slick and asked them to just informally give me a number on all 14 service areas so that we can finally come up with some sort of a bottom line number as to what it's actually going to cost. I'm also trying to see if there is a way to secure additional funding. The money that is coming down from the federal government to the state broadband office is still quite a ways away out there. I don't think that we're going to see the benefit from that for at least a couple of years, but I'm going to try and see if there's a way to secure some additional help. So at the end of the day, the choice is going to come down to do nothing and wait till all the federal money is in the hands of the state and let the state determine where those passings are. We could, once we have a better handle on what the costs will be by area, negotiate and get some areas covered and other areas not covered. Or thirdly, and my hope is that there's room to negotiate with the different providers to either reduce the number of passings that ultimately get served by fiber and find a way to serve them by fixed wireless, see if there's additional monies that we can bring in and get everything done. But I don't have enough information as of right now to give you a final answer on that. So just want to put it out there that, again, I guess I'm not surprised that we didn't get a final easy number to pull the trigger on. But we're not done yet. There's more lines of both funding and potential solutions that we can pursue before we make any final decisions.
Laura, and maybe you're not prepared to answer my questions, but they bid on different segments, right? Did they identify them or did you identify them?
So I identified the segments and then they determined which areas they bid on.
And now when they bid on it, is that the bid is what we will pay them for them to do it?
So basically, both of the vendors proposed to contribute a portion of the cost. And then there was a request for funding from the county. What I can tell you is that if we accepted the lowest bids on all the service areas that were bid on and got 690 passings out of this, the cost would be about $5.6 million. So if we look at the amount of ARPA funding that we had set aside, which is ballpark about $3.5 million, we don't have enough money to do it, and there's still 200 addresses that we haven't accounted for. So again, that's what I'm going to try and work on, either reducing the cost, increasing the help, finding a way to.
Can you tell by that bid or those bids, are they putting much skin in the game, or are we carrying the majority of the load?
We are carrying the majority of the load.
So they're really.
So one of the things that it's just, it is a fact. There is a lot of federal money that is going to make its way down to the individual states. The carriers all know this. They all know that they're going to be able to reach out. And I'm assuming it's going to be a reverse auction process, just like the previous broadband deployments have been, in which the state puts out an RFP similar to what we did. The difference is the instead of by zip code, which we talked about previously was a problem in terms of one address in a zip code served, assumed all served. The federal mapping process is dropping that down to address level. So there will be more accuracy in terms of what the providers are able to bid on. But again, they all know that there's money out there. So I do not expect that this will get any cheaper. I can tell you that Onondaga County paid Verizon $14,000 a passing. I can tell you that the average of what the county cost would be if we were to take all of these bids, the average county cost would be about $8,000 a passing.
Just one more question. 690 they bid on.
Mm-hmm.
And then the 5.6 million you said would have been the cost. If
the cost
we took
to us,
but for that, just for the 690, and there's still 160.
191.
191 unserved when you get done with that.
Plus.
So really that 5.6 million is a lot higher.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You asked the two bidders to bid on all 14 parcels. For the town of Argyle, I can't think of any reason why they separated, why they didn't bid on that one, except my house is in it. That could be the issue. But for the one over in the corner of Fort Ann and down in White Creek, the reason there was no bids because of distance is that, are we gonna get them to just not be responsive because of those two things they can't get to?
So I think one of the possibilities is having isolated out all of, based on the information that we had, all of the unserved addresses, there are certain areas, Death Rock Way up in Whitehall, areas up in the Adirondacks and Fort Ann's, that no matter what and no matter who, they are going to be prohibitively expensive. But the strategy was that if we had tried to isolate those out and say we can't take care of them, the more you do that, the more you sort of drive yourself into a circle where you're eventually going to make those impossible to cover. So the idea was to try and cover them. What we may do next is separate out some of those addresses. And so, for example, there's some of the addresses that were in Fort Ann that were not bid on that we might be able to cover by a tower in Warren County through fixed wireless. So it'll come down to, we may end up taking some of those addresses out that it's going to be way too expensive to get to fiber, and see if there's a way to get them covered with fixed wireless. And that will be part of these discussions.
I know in the specific scenario in one of the locations in White Creek that one of those providers is building out already. And people who live on that have told me, oh, we're getting fiber now. And it's still in this, it's an unserved area and an area that they're not bidding on.
So the bottom, we're kind of at the mercy of providers here who probably aren't ever going to tell us the complete truth.
Right.
So I think, as with anything else, if you are dealing with, you have a problem to solve and you have 15 entities or agencies that you're trying to negotiate with to serve the problem, it's a lot harder to do that than it is with one, than to just say, can you give me a solution that covers everything? And that's part of the reason for asking the two entities that bid to give me total costs on both, because it may turn out that it makes some level of sense to just try and negotiate with them on an individual basis rather than a combination basis, or maybe not. We'll have to see what we get
Would
back.
it be a good test? Would it be a good test move to ask the fixed wireless providers what it would take to do all our unserved?
I've already done that.
That conversation. Brian and then Dana.
So on the demographics, I assume that Slick bid on the ones that were close to their backbone and Spectrum bid close to their backbone. Is that?
So the way, the service areas, the reason that they were divided out the way that they were is I looked at where the nearest infrastructure is to make sure that somebody had a path to get there. And also, what I didn't want to do was isolate out individual towns so that we were in a position where some towns got everything and some towns got nothing. So I tried to divide it so that.
But they bid according to what you would have expected.
Yes, yeah.
And keep in mind, when Hebron got totally covered, I don't know how many actual households that is. It cost between 7 and 8 million was the funding for that was. So you're not a lot different numbers here. So.
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you that Slick was substantially less in cost than Spectrum was. In terms of the bidding, the only one that really surprised me, the Fort Ann one didn't surprise me because it's remote and hard to access. White Creek didn't surprise me because of the franchise agreement problem with Spectrum. But the Argyle one did surprise me because both Slick and Spectrum have infrastructure near there. Really? And I'm not really sure why we didn't get bids on that. But
That's for you.
Dana.
The fixed wireless, satellite or Hudson Valley, can serve the most remote area in our county. But lots of time the conversation is, if you can't get fiber, you can't get anything. So can't we just leapfrog right over fiber and forget about it and go like, but you said you already reached out to Starlink and Hudson Valley, because they're also fixed wireless.
So Starlink is not fixed wireless. Starlink is satellite.
What is fixed wireless?
Fixed wireless basically operates off of a fiber backbone that operates their network and then use a radio signal last mile to the house. So that's actually only partly correct. So one of the things in looking at the fixed wireless capacity, The minimum threshold in terms of speeds that was put into the RFP was they had to be able to serve at a minimum of 100 by 20. Because like Hudson Valley Wireless's radio signals, depending on the distance from the tower and the direction and the height, some of the speeds that they are able to serve at are 25 by 3, and some of them are 200 by 200. So then it comes down to when you say fixed wireless can serve all of them, it then depends on what you mean by serve.
Well,
We are,
I meant satellite, which is not
and so
definition of fixed wireless.
it's not fixed wireless and is not considered broadband by the feds, but it is definitely an option where other solutions don't work. So I will tell you that for us to use our USDA funding, the minimum threshold speed that they will allow is 100 by 20. And out of those 600 addresses that I was looking to have fixed wireless cover, a couple of hundred of those can't be served at 100 by 20. Their speeds are lower than that. With tower upgrades, it might be possible to change that.
I think that's too fast for them.
Well,
Too
you can't
fast.
get anything done when you get
Doesn't
done.
lie, but there's no way you would ever need 100. No.
Well, so it comes down to streaming services and those type
Yeah.
of things. So, I mean, as the transition comes over, of course, Spectrum's forcing back against this because they're direct, but your streaming services are gaining more and more momentum. When you stream, what's the up is, the download on this one stream is 15, 20 megs when you stream?
Well, that's why the minimum is 20, the
Right,
threshold on the
right.
USDA one.
But then if the only thing you're just streaming that's it, you're not able to do any searching, so.
And you might need 100 if you got a family of
If
5.
you've got a
Right.
family of 5 and all 5 of them are streaming at the same
Right.
time,
But that's very luxurious.
Not luxurious.
I think we should be
That's the
looking
new
at
normal.
what we can get, not, well, you can't buy a Cadillac, so you can't have a car. That's ridiculous reason.
No,
Well, I also think it's a way to promote the region for whether it's,
Right.
regional work or it's,
Home values, anything.
right.
It's not luxurious for a home business.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, some of the people that I've had major conversations with have been home business operators who literally just want to put their process orders through on a rainy day and they have to wait till the next day until the clouds clear away so that they can put their orders through. Yeah, Dave first and then Dan.
So I had extensive conversations with Valley Wireless again. And the problem is they couldn't reach it. They couldn't get around the mountains because the track line of sight, I shouldn't say mountains, a lot taller hills. They couldn't get around them. They had to put too many repeaters around. Their best solution was to go over the other side of in Vermont and beam it straight in, which they were considering doing, but we never did anything.
Yeah, I would, again, one of the things that is undoubtedly happening is entities that may have had build-out plans on the table are holding them because they know money is coming.
Well, you know that if they're actually putting stuff in and they're not. So Verizon did the last time. Verizon had built a whole bunch of stuff and they were just waiting to get paid and then they sold it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Laura, you're mentioning USDA money and then we have ARPA money. You got 3.1 million?
Well, we're gonna have an ARPA committee meeting to talk about that. It's ballpark, somewhere around there,
Maybe the ballpark,
about 3.5. Yeah.
3.5.
Yeah.
And that's not USDA?
No, the USDA is an additional $1 million.
1 million, okay, that's what I was trying to.
The complicated thing about USDA, we talked about this at a previous ag planning meeting, is that in order for us to be able to use that funding, we have to own all of the equipment. So it doesn't, what we can't do with that money is parse it out to more than one vendor. We're going to have an agreement in place with one vendor in which we own the equipment until it depreciates and then sell it back. So we talked about that in the committee either last month or month before, and the committee agreed that that was a viable solution. So again, it's going to be almost impossible to use that money with more than one vendor. It made most sense to use that money for a fixed wireless solution because it includes a lot of equipment. It's just so on average, what's called the make ready cost, which is the permitting, the replacing of poles, et cetera, is about half of the cost of the fiber.
Right?
So Spectrum was about half again or double what?
Close to double.
Close to double. So is it worthwhile to reach out to Slick and say, hey, we do it all for, this is what we got? Is that an opportunity?
Well, so I've asked them to, like, if they were to bid on all, I'm gonna ask both of them, on all 14, you know, what's your number?
Okay.
And then we'll go from there with discussions.
Yes.
I think their holdout is what's holding us up.
Wait for me.
Just wait.
And why would they pull the trigger if they think they're gonna get more
And
money
if you
from
build out
somebody else?
before, it's not available to you. It's just like our.
And the part where some of the place, well, one specific place in White Creek, they already did the build out. They were waiting on the.
They're like the money you get.
No, they're waiting on equipment. The equipment was on, they couldn't get it. So that was the whole situation, you know, and I didn't hear that from the vendor. I heard that because that's what the vendor told the homeowner, is that they didn't have the equipment in order to offer it to them because that was on delay.
But even if that's the case, why would you wait out till the grant one?
You probably would. So there is.
Wait, do you want to do you want paid service? I mean, this person's ready to start paying you this right here. You have the equipment now. They might have already got, that might have been part of the previous order, was that equipment. You know what I'm saying? So they can't double dip. So let's put the equipment in and start getting the service. I know.
So when I have more information, I will bring it back to you, hopefully, by next committee meeting, but I will let you know.
All right. Any other questions about broadband? Cool. Fort Ann Whitehall Trail.
So I want to give you a quick update on that. In the dim and distant memory, so this was a grant that we got 5 years ago from the state. This was at the time that the Empire State Trail was being built. We had proposed to get the section of the Empire State Trail that is on Route 4 going from Fort Ann to Whitehall. It is basically a death trap off of Route 4 and onto an off-road alignment that would essentially parallel the canal going from Fort Ann to Whitehall. So we had done some preliminary work. We'd identified a route. We'd had conversations with both landowners and CP Rail that the trail would have to go through. And we had positive feedback, which was the reason that we went ahead and asked for the grant. We were effectively awarded $430,000 by a Department of State program called Local Waterfront Revitalization, and we were awarded $150,000 by Canals. Shortly after we were awarded the funding, CP Rail went through some major organizational changes. So the long and the short of it is they had initially told us that for some sort of lease fee or possibly donation or exchange of land, they would be happy to do it. I will tell you that between 2021 and 2022, I logged close to 40 hours in phone calls with CP Rail. We spent a lot of money on engineering, giving them the same things over and over and over again. And they basically kept pushing back and delaying until we finally thought we had somewhere, and then they fired their entire real estate department and we had to start all over again. So the most recent information that we got from them was at the beginning of this year, which said CP Rail is not giving up land because they're not making any more of it. They don't want any trails under any circumstances anywhere near their highways or their rail lines, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the problem is the grant was a 5-year grant. So I had many discussions with Department of State last year. They recommended that I wait till the end of last year to ask for a grant extension so we could determine what we were going to do about this. We did that in November. They just gave us an extension about 2 weeks ago, supposedly a 2-year extension, but it's dated the end of 2025. So they basically, it was 6 months to get the extension. So we now have a year and a half to complete this project. And given the impediment of CP Rail, that is just not going to happen. So effectively what we told both Department of State and Canals is that instead of the original intention was to design and permit the entire length of trail and then actually construct a small portion of it at the southern end of it. We're now going to move on to designing and constructing as much as we can and get as far north as we can before we run into the CP rail impediments. Because the choice was either do that or give the money back. So, I mean, it is unfortunate. It has been 5 years of back and forth from what was originally a positive, we want to partner with you, to essentially being an impediment.
That'd basically be like a dead end trail, but that'd be okay, so what?
Well, it would be a dead end trail, but you're right, dead end trails are not at all desirable. But
Well, you
there-
turn around anyway and go back to where you started.
You could. The other thing is most of the entire area that we would traverse is lands owned by Canal Corp. And if there's enough acreage owned by Canal Corp that what we want to try and do is make some loops through that Canal Corp and maybe put a gazebo there or something so that it's not just a dead end experience, that it would be something worthwhile getting to. And then the idea would be not to give up, but to try and work with Canal Corp and other state agencies, which we have done. And by the way, I hear from other counties that this issue with CP Rail is happening everywhere. I mean, it is definitely.
One always did.
It always.
Putnam tried to get that across to their park.
That
For
one,
20 years.
that was a level crossing issue. So that one, CP Rail has been, this isn't even a level crossing. Big, other than we don't want you on our land at all. The biggest concern is an area just at the southern end of Whitehall. They had told us that they didn't want a trail within 90 feet, I believe it was, of the track. Because of the water line, the trail would have ended up being 70 feet of the track, but it's a slope. It's a hugely steep slope. Somebody would have to climb up a hill to get to the track, and CP Rail still said no. So again, I think we're not going to give up, and we're going to continue to try and find ways to get it to continue, but I don't want to give the money back to the state. I'd rather do something with it, get as far as we can, and then regroup and start working on how to push it further north into it.
Go ahead, Sue.
Bill likes to go to construction sites, we would have looked at the west end. Where we put down. How deep is that going to have to be used as a trail of what?
Dave, you know best on that, right?
I do not know how far down this going. I assume it's going down far. It's going in the water.
The northern end of the trail has, we thought this was going to be the most expensive piece of it before the CP Rail issues. There's a considerable amount of wetland. So the idea there was to put that, it's called helical pile, which by DEC standards does not, it doesn't displace wetland because it's essentially like a cement sonotube and boards on top of it going through the wetland. And the trail, it was a 7-mile trail and it would have come into Whitehall fairly near the wastewater plant. But again, no matter what you do, there's wetland in the area around there.
Was there a discussion one time is not crossing the bridge, staying on the east side, but then you hit the Meadowee and the bridge there was going to be too expensive?
So when we did the preliminary design, so the trail is actually on the trail is on the west side of the canal. On the west side, there was one bridge that we knew that we were going to have to construct, and the rest of it was probably going to be culverts and or the boardwalk. The problem with the east side of the canal is that there were a great many landowners that objected to having the trail.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, and that was why it ended up on the.
And that had more potential to go through eventually if you had, I mean, they're easier maybe to deal with than CP Rail, which is on the west side. So that's why I didn't know if that's maybe it ought to stay on the east side and hope for the best down the road than this. Because I think CP Rail will always be a dead end.
I will tell you, so at the end of the Empire State Trail, when we put the grant in, I mean, we knew it wasn't gonna be cheap because there's so much wetlands, et cetera, and we knew we didn't have enough money to construct it all. The assumption was we'd go find it later. However, at the end of Empire State Development or Empire State Trail, it turned out that the average cost per mile to construct those trails was about $3 million. Given what's happened to prices and what's happened to construction, especially in those areas in the wetland out by Whitehall, it's going to be considerably more than that. So again, that's not going to stop us from looking for solutions, but I think at this point, we're going to go as far as we can and then trying to determine later on what we're able to do. Any questions on that?
Any other questions on that? Right. Go ahead, up to 250 Celebration Committee appointment.
Okay, you may recall. We had some members of the 250th anniversary potential committee here at Ag Planning a couple of months ago. I've since had an opportunity to meet and I probably made copies. To meet, and Deb, you already have this because I emailed it. So I've had an opportunity to meet with them. So the first step that they're looking for is recognition of the committee as the organization that's spearheading all of these events. So I drafted this resolution. Our honorable attorney has already taken a look at it. It essentially mirrors a resolution that historic Saratoga County did. We are anticipating that by the time of the full board meeting at which this resolution will be heard in July, we will have the names of the committee, chair, president, secretary, treasurer, et cetera. So in my meetings with them, what I have proposed is we'll get the committee organized, and then I've asked them to come back to me with a just a general synopsis of what they would see as the type of events, the type of things that they would need funding for, so that I can determine how we might be able to help them through the tourism budget. So what I will likely do as part of the 2024 tourism budget, the remaining ARPA funds that we have not asked for yet, use some of that funding to help build websites, help with planned events, et cetera. But I'm waiting for them to come back to me with general synopsis on what they see as appropriate.
Okay.
Is there a reason why the Washington County Historical Society can't do this and you don't need another layer? Because it says it's going to operate under the auspices of the Washington County Historical Society. Why wouldn't they just do it?
Because, so the president of the Historical Society is Matt Huntington, who will probably be a member of the committee, but the Historical Society isn't the only entity that's part of the committee. We're also looking at other town historians, et cetera. So part of the reason for the involvement of the Historical Society is that they needed an entity that could basically write checks for things that they're doing. So Nat is part of the Historical Society and will be on the committee, but they needed without creating a new nonprofit, they needed an umbrella to work under.
Or do they get funded? What County Historical Society in our budget?
They do not. They did at one point, but they don't now.
The Washington County Historian.
That's the county historian, that's a county office, each county's required to have a historian.
Each town's required to have a historian too, right? Any other questions? Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, one question big for me is where you've got the excess in there, how many committee members? Committee members work, or committees work fine up to a certain point, after which they become top heavy and flow.
You think 17 is a little heavy then?
17 is probably really heavy.
I was just
40 is really heavy, like the fair.
32.
32, I'm sorry.
Saratoga did 13. We can certainly
But I-
Lucky 13, huh?
Well, you gotta have the number of people that are interested too. I mean, this is something that takes a lot of effort and you need people that are gonna put in that effort. 13, you get the 3 that really do all the work, that's what usually happens.
We could put something in there that says membership shall be between X and X numbers, depending on how many they're able to find willing to participate.
I think we're a little unique too. I don't think there's many counties other than Washington County that the revolution was fought from one end to the other, all the way down to Way Street. So, I mean, we are unique, but
This
the
is
point you're
this is a
making is
good
good.
thing, but I just didn't want it to get
Unbelievable.
unwieldy and not, it'd be a shame to miss the opportunity.
Right.
Because we created an infighting curveball.
Well, so at my last town board meeting, I brought it up to my town historian. He had not, I don't know if Pat had reached out to him yet, but he was not aware that they were currently a committee being organized to take this on. So I'm gonna connect him. And I think that's what the committee is looking at, getting a representation from, multiple townships.
I think, according to what they told me, that they've actually been having some difficulty getting people interested in participating. So I don't think it's going to be a problem of too many. It may be a problem of not enough. But they may not have done as good a job as they could on the outreach and trying to secure committee members.
Right? Maybe this is a Roger question. Does the resolves in here require that these people be appointed by Washington County? Are we now taking over, making these actual appointments to the committee? And if so, who's doing it?
No, you're authorizing there to be a committee of however many number of people. Is that what we're doing? Under the auspices, so, under the auspices of the Historical Society, so I think the Historical Society would put that group together. You're just recognizing them in essence.
Okay.
So that means if I get another 20 people together and say, no, I'm the official committee of Washington County Revolution, you would say, no, we recognize this group over here in the Historical Society. We played that game of tourism for a while.
Yes, we did. As a matter of fact, that's what I was thinking.
If you're sounding like Bob, the last resolve, I see you're into this, you're in it for 10 years. I think they might have to put an age limit, point somebody like me, I mean, be no good. And years.
Our risk management person would advise about it. I make a motion.
Motion by Dave. In a second. Second by Brian. Any further dialogue? Up to, we put up to. Do that up to?
Up to 17.
Yeah.
But under discussion, why 10 years? If it ends in 2026, why does it go to 2000?
It's the federal declaration. The reality is the celebrations really last for 3 years, but it's officially by federal standards a 10-year thing.
Yeah.
What is 250 years called? Is it a 5.5 centennial? What is it called?
Winston.
250.
Just had it came.
2.5 centennials.
What is it?
2.5 centennials.
Semi-quincentennial.
Oh, say that fast 5 times.
Well, I think we should have a semi-quincentennial committee.
How do you spell
Long time
that?
Thank you.
Good on the 10-year explanation.
No.
No, but it's.
We can change it to any number we want. That just follows.
Well, no, I just to drag it out 10 years right now. We gotta be considerate. I do want to be on it for 10 years. I'm just my thought. I don't know what the right answer is. I just think that sounds like wrong answer.
Laura's gonna be on for 10 years.
Discussion's been 10 years.
Go ahead, Dana.
What question? Laura said you need somebody that can write checks, so that's gonna be some funding. What would this fall underneath, planning? Or boards, that other thing that's called boards and others?
No, so we are not directly funding them a general line item. What is going to happen is, you may recall, out of the ARPA funding, we were allocated $600,000 for additional tourism programming. So our tourism budget consists of our regular annual budget. And then the first tranche of that 600,000 was taken in the year before last. We will have used that up by the end of this year. So I will be requesting the second tranche of 200,000. Included in that budget request will be specifics for funding this. What I have told them is my preference, instead of just having them tell me what they think they want to do and cutting them a check. If it's things like building a website or marketing creatives, I would rather put that through our regular marketing agency and handle it ourselves rather than just handing over a check. So whenever possible, we would take care of that through the ARPA section of the tourism budget when it's
Currently
proposed.
zero money budget for advertising / publicity / American Relief Plan. So there's zero budget.
We rolled over what was unspent from last year. It was 100 and some odd thousand,
Well, there's 225,000
right?
in 2022, but there's nothing.
It was done.
Zeroed out.
It wouldn't be in the.
It's looking at the adopted budget. Yeah, it's not in the adopted budget.
Motion on the floor. Any other comments? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. All right, moving on to the short-term rental legislation.
So this is just a quick update for you. We've talked about the fact that right now we get revenue from Airbnb collecting occupancy tax, not Verbo or any other entity, because they have declined to enter into an agreement with us. There has been a discussion at state level many times over the last few years in which New York Department of State would take over regulation of short-term rentals and require all of the platforms to collect occupancy tax and remit it back. So it's come and gone several times. This year, it has made it past the Senate. It is in the Assembly. They have it on the agenda to make a decision about this week. If that passes, then again, I mean, it will mean occupancy tax remitted to us, and somewhere, I know I forwarded to you, Roger, some of the legislation text, because I was trying to make a determination, what kind of a burden does it put on the county in terms of inspections of these short-term rentals? And then Jimmy and I met with the executive director of NISTA, thank you. I left it, NISTA, yeah. Just to talk about the theory behind the budget. And essentially what they are saying is they believe, but until the text of the legislation passes, that it's going to basically be an honor system, that bed and breakfasts are going to be registered. They're going to have to say, yes, I have fire extinguishers, yes, I have this, and then it would be up to the counties as to whether they wanted to create some sort of an inspection program. But again, legislation hasn't passed, just saying what's on the table right now. Hopefully we will know by next week.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, either it gets tabled and then it's still got to go to the governor's office and get signed if it does pass.
And there's still gonna be most like an implementation period before, it actually gets rolled out.
If the state's involved, there's usually money in it for them. So will we actually see any more money, or adding the other one on, they just take that from it?
No, the OCC tax was still maintaining the 4%. You still, by this law, you still are able to continue your OCC tax. Your OCC tax can then, if you have an OCC tax law, they can still, it'll go on that. So it's 4% to the state, 3% to Washington County, and then the OCC tax on top of that.
There's a registration fee.
There's gonna be something.
There is
There's
registration.
something, or they're gonna be
There's the
doing.
fee to the state.
They were talking a 2-year registration.
Yeah, it would have to be renewed.
In order for this to get passed, there's going to be, I think there's going to be some, legislation in it that happens,
on the floor.
Well, state's getting money outside of.
But
Theoretically, can't exceed the cost of developing the system.
Yeah.
Do we support this legislation?
well,
I mean, we're talking about it, like,
It's gonna-
we support it, I'd like to know if we support it.
well, so it's going to, Sam and I have had a lot of conversation about this. Personally, I feel it's good because it's gonna bring revenue to the county. It's gonna bring additional revenue dollars to us. It's gonna also force Verbo to now get into the ring with us and, allow us to get some revenue from them as well through the octaves. It could help to, weed out some of the dirty money in this too, where, some of these secondary homeowners are using this as a way to launder money, they're not being taxed on it. There's no I-9s going out to these individuals at the end of the year through Airbnb or VRBO. This is going to bring true regulation to it in the interim. The problem is I still feel like there's a lot of liability to this. The state's gonna implement a tax, but they're not really closing the loop on liability.
Who was the liability rest out?
Homeowner.
Oh, okay, but I'm just trying to understand when you say we, whether you're talking county or.
Okay, so as a
Because I know
county,
you're
we're gonna have short-term rental registration. It's gonna be for this, they have to register with the state. Who's gonna be responsible for, following up to make sure it's most likely gonna fall on the county, right?
Most likely.
All right, and if as a county, we have these registered properties and we're taking their word that they have fire extinguishers, that they have working smoke detectors, working carbon monoxide. There's an open liability there. If something were to happen tragically, then what's that?
Not for us, because they're certifying it to the state. Unless the state imposes an obligation on us to actually go look.
And that's where I think your legislation is going to come from. I think the state is going to end up mandating that.
The first fire will be regulations coming out of regulations, quite frankly. So.
Eventually, there's just a lot of questions. Now, does the county have authority to come into my town? I have my own code.
So
We don't do anything under this law.
this law
We
does,
don't do anything except take the money under this law.
and it does still allow local municipalities to ban or regulate short-term rentals. So for example, the laws that Fort Ann is working on
Done.
still be in play.
And there's other counties throughout the state who have already had creative registration, local laws to restrict or mandate short-term rentals. So
Mostly.
Well, the reason I'm creating this dialogue is if this is something good, do we want to formally say we support it, in which case we notify our elected state assemblymen who this goes before and tell them we're in support of it? Or do we keep our hands right off the bed and just see which way the nickel flips down there? That's all.
The question may be irrelevant as soon as before this conversation.
They may be talking about right now for all we know.
yeah,
I know in Fort Ann, we have a process, it's gonna be a registration fee in town level for us to maintain, we have to make the program run, so.
And actually, if they register with you, they don't have to register with the state. Because it says if you register with one system, you don't have to register with multiple.
so it might be, but then that becomes a liable situation. If the registration is with the county, then.
The county doesn't have.
But let's say the county does create a registration.
Well, sure, then you're assuming all kinds of liability.
Right. So in Sam's situation in Fort Ann, are they assuming the liability? The town?
You'd be better off with, sounds like the town's having a question to me, but.
I didn't say.
My uneducated
But
opinion.
we've got our attorney went through and the things that you're asking about the fire extinguishers, those types of things, they're certified that they have it in place, the same as a septic system. So it's.
So, more to come.
More to follow on that one.
Well, the difficulty is, if there's any, is that we locally collect the occupancy tax. So it's the people that may be doing this that are reporting
Right.
that will be the enforcement act. Right. Like, we don't have a lot of hotels, motels and whatever, so we kind of know who they are. Right? So
Yeah.
the state's collecting the sales tax and remitting to us, but the bed tax we collect ourselves. And so it could be an increased burden collection and sales tax for folks not paying.
Right, collection is
That's
on the
only thing-
county.
That's the only thing we collect, 4% debt.
The state would share the registry information, and then the county has the ability to look at that and say, oh, we didn't get tax remitted from whoever, right?
And the companies would collect it.
Why is there dialogue out there that this industry needs to be regulated? Is it for the collection of revenue, or is it because you get some people that are gonna be there for one night and they party all night, they're loud? What needs to be regulated?
My regulation, and it goes back from when short-term rentals started. I've worked hotels for 20 years prior to managing them all up there. This conversation started back in 2011, 2012, when Airbnb first started taking off. It's your hotels that are pushing back against the life safety. Hotels have to perform life safety every year. They have to have annual inspections of their monitoring systems, annual inspection of fire extinguishers, annual inspection of security measures, lighting and smoke detectors. Their claim is that we have to do all this for the safety of the guests, and we have 100 guests. Let's say a standard room, 100 rooms, 2 people room. You have 200 guests in that hotel one night. They have to take all these standard precautions, and yet somebody who's renting a house, might have 10 guests in there, doesn't have to take any of these safety precautions. So your push is coming from the hotel operators, and it's been like that for years. And that's what NISTA is continuing to push on. That's been their point forever on this, is that they're advocating on behalf of the hotel operators.
And it's causing your housing shortage, so there's probably a lot of little players behind pushing the needle too, saying this will fix our housing problem, get you out of it.
You want to follow them at 73407 and Assembly 1140.
We are pushing it for in because of the, number one, the number one that we have, but number two, their businesses.
Oh, yeah, your town is unique in that.
They're being run as a business.
When you're on the lakes, it's a completely different story. When you're out in
But I
down
just
Jackson,
didn't know
Easton, or White Creek,
council could get behind it.
it's really
Well, I was
small.
trying to get some dialogue.
What's that?
They're all commercial because they're an LLC, so there's gonna be.
Oh, so like for instance, in Samstown, he's got one conglomerate that operates, how many properties?
They've got 9 now.
9 properties that they operate, and they are an LLC, but they also operate in Lake George as well. So they're large in comparison to what most of the other short-term rental operators down in the smaller rural areas maybe own 1-2 properties. It's not as they're owning and operating up to, I think, close to 25 properties, right? Yeah. So
Probably very reasonable.
what's that?
Probably very reasonable.
Them? Yeah. Their properties are much larger, they're sleeping 20 to 25 people, 20, 26 people at those properties, so.
But it just may be the timing, but over the last, since we put the law in, we've had another 17 places call us areas and buy a property up there, and they're glad to see we have a law, so they will know what they've got to do. They can't, you're not going to jump into it blindly, and then after they buy it, have a bunch of things that have to be done that they weren't aware of. Which kind of plays into what Brian was saying about the fact that you buy these places up. It's a double-edged sword. Somebody will say they buy the place, but you don't have the school system, you have no kids to maintain a school. The other side of it is, if you don't have the school kids, you don't need many teachers, so school doesn't have to be as big as it was. And the people pay the taxes on it, the people living there or not. And you do have other consumers coming in that have more money to spend at the same time. It's kind of a double-edged sword. Takes away your affordable housing. Yeah, I think it's.
This bill doesn't have anything to do with whether they exist or not.
That's
right. It's this more cautionary, in terms of getting behind or not, it's more a cautionary tale, because now we're wading into the regulatory pool. And as we know, New York doesn't dip its toes into the regulatory pool. It dives in. It cannonballs in, right? So splashback is what we get. So beware of the splash when they're diving into the regulatory pool. Because you're right, the next logical thing is inspections. And they don't have a ton of people to do that, so.
It's gonna come down to that.
Right, so it's what could follow from this.
There could be other pieces.
Right, so be aware that they're now getting into regulating short-term rentals, or at least becoming aware of them, so the next term is regulations, and then the next thing is who's going to do it.
down in New York City Metro, they've already got regulations in place for short-term rentals down there in regards to life safety. They took that on as a whole because back in the mid 2010s anyway, they were getting a lot of pushback from hotels down there already.
So Assemblywoman Warner is co-sponsor.
Yes. Assemblyman Matt Simpson is not for the legislation.
He's not for
It's not listed as a co-sponsor.
We've had conversation on why he's not.
We have to.
And I think I opened his eyes up to some reasons why he should be for it, but. Right. I see, you guys all see Beth Gillis is here, so we do have other business.
We do have other business. So I invited Beth to attend because, as you all know, CFA season is upon us. And there are a couple of programs that are potentially beneficial, delivered as county-wide programs. Beth is here to talk about one of them and to ask whether we want to participate or not. Beth, I'll give you the floor.
Just say yes, sure.
Well, I know you guys are hungry, so I'll try to make it. That's gonna get me through this quick or get a whole bunch of notes. As Laura mentioned, there's quite a few programs out right now. It's the New York State Consolidated Funding Application time. We're working with some of the towns in Washington County and some things, but there is one county-wide program that I wanted to see if you guys were interested in. So Department of State has opened up a countywide resiliency grant program. And so it's for the creation of a countywide plan to prepare for future climate change risks and vulnerabilities to infrastructure and the built environment within the county. And so work that this could include is doing like flood modeling on county infrastructure. So if there were a 100-year flood, if there were a 200-year flood, where is the most vulnerable built environment within the county? And then planning to mitigate that before it actually happens. Mitigating heat island effects in the impervious areas of the county. So the more built environments have more impervious surface, that actually increases the temperature due to sun reflection. So what can you do within those built environments to add a natural element that absorb heat, but also beautify the area? Identify natural assets that are available to mitigate flooding, so keeping floodplains and things like that intact, but also looking at those areas to utilize as outdoor recreational opportunities for economic development purposes. So yes, we're keeping them intact because they could help mitigate flooding, but they're also useful as an economic development tool for the county. Obviously, farmland protection measures and identifying ways to protect vulnerable populations. So where there are accessible cooling centers, what cell availability is there. This is something that we could put cell into. And the difference between this program and like your hazard mitigation plan is that this is a lot of public education and outreach as the Department of State program. They really push the public outreach and engagement part of it. So the grants are due the 28th. They are a 90% grant, 10% match. That is the best we've ever gotten from the state. There's a maximum grant funding of $300,000, but we were thinking a Washington County plan would probably be more around $200,000. So we would write a grant for $180,000 with a $20,000 match from Washington County. One of the things I didn't put on the sheet, one of the reasons that I wanted to discuss this grant with you guys is because when I started writing grants 15 years ago, getting money from Department of State and DEC was all about, is your water body on the priority water body list? And if it is, you get to work in that area. And then the state kind of navigated and transitioned over to watershed plans. Are your projects listed in watershed plans? Well, now as we're reading not the requirements, but the point system for getting implementation grants, what the state is now putting in there is resiliency plans. What resiliency plan is this project in? So at the end of this process, there would be a list of projects to get implemented, what the cost would be, which was a priority for short-term implementation, medium, long-term, all just kind of around the crux of identifying vulnerable places and trying to mitigate those issues before something happens. We'd write the grant, obviously.
Question. Go ahead, Brian.
So basically, you're gonna use this grant money to try to do things we're already doing or would be doing.
You're using it to create a plan. So we're actually going to look at future modeling. So what you're doing right now, and your DPW does a great job of inventorying your assets, knowing what you have, knowing what needs to be fixed and that kind of thing, but that's current conditions, what we're looking at, and this one is future potential conditions with increased storms.
But it's
increased
stuff
flooding.
you'd be looking at, even if it doesn't come under the name resiliency.
Yes.
So it's just a way to look and get funding for it.
Yeah.
Motion by Brian, second by Dave. Yeah, Joe.
I want myself, from what you just said, I really like the ostrich approach to this. Stick your head in the sand and let it all go by. I don't know if I want to look for problems and then spend money on trying to solve a problem that we don't have.
No, I see what you're saying, but these are things that we're gonna be looking at things we already know are coming.
No, we
And this is
don't
the way
know
to
they're
fund
coming. That's the thing.
We know they're coming, we just don't know if they're coming from resiliency or not.
No,
We're
I mean,
looking at things
you're
that-
making your money on climate change and it could flip the other, in 2 years from now, go the opposite way. Climate change had nothing to do with it.
Right, but the problem might still be the same information you gather. will
But we're
still-
looking for a problem, and why spend money to look for a problem? Right now, we can't find enough money to solve our problems that we got, and we have more coming every day that we're looking right in the face problem. And this is we're gonna apply for a grant, look for more problems.
Well, I want to read the first bullet.
I think they're the same.
I did.
Research and data gathering to assess an overall risk of infrastructure, flood modeling.
Mhm.
I can tell you when the rain came through, where farmers had their whole crops wiped out.
Well, that's why I'm looking at bullet number 4, which is farmland protection. So
No sale.
Oh, yeah, it's in the floodplain.
We got a few
Good,
projects
that's
there
all
that you could
sound
probably
good.
look at and, look at for some of the resiliency.
Well, that's why I
We have
asked,
a bridge now that acts like a dam. That is something that's real.
well, that's why I asked the question the way I did. It's gonna come under a different title, but we're still doing the same things. We're just getting funding to do the same thing. That's-
So one thing to point out
I'm
is that
probably the only one that feels that way, so I'm not gonna try to sell anybody else. I'm a no.
So one thing to look at is this would actually be the county, obviously with a consultant planner, doing the work of evaluating where the issues are in each of our communities. Some of it might be county-owned infrastructure issues, some of it might be local town-owned infrastructure. So this, if it was a county level issue that we were responsible for, points back to we've identified this and we're going to take care of it, but would also allow the towns to, if they were looking for funding to address an issue, to point to the fact that this had been previously evaluated.
any other?
I do have a question. So who is actually doing the evaluating?
So we would presumably put out an RFP to do a consultant. Would that be something the regional planning board would want to take on, or?
No, we take on the administration and grant management, but if we hire a consultant, that's specializing in this work.
So there's no, I don't want to say work, but there's no work or responsibility at the county level?
A lot of information.
Other than
will come from county
the
departments.
cash match, no.
Yeah.
And
Running the.
Al,
paying the bills,
Al
like,
invoicing,
oh,
yeah.
Well, look at them without-
So actually,
Still here.
the county responsibility would likely be participation with the consultant. So for example, DPW would probably want to be involved in discussions about where issues are. So the issue, the county responsibility would be participation to whatever extent we deem reasonable and the cost of the cash
And that's
match.
the part, I guess I wonder what responsibility or workload it's gonna put on the departments to do this. That's all.
So we'll, like I said, we'll do the grant admin, so all the reporting, all the liaisoning to the state agency, all of the reimbursement paperwork, which we have forward to Al, who looks through. And then we would do grant manage, so we would manage the consultants, we would keep the project moving, making sure that everything's going, but yeah, we would want some obviously participation from the county. Laura, Deb, some of the department heads just to talk about what's going on. Like I said, there is a big public engagement kind of part of this, but as far as like adding monumental paperwork loads to anybody, it won't. That's what we did.
I think that's why that's the reason it makes sense to me, because Dan's absolutely right. You don't want to go looking for problems. That's true. But by doing it this way, these are gonna be the same problems you already have, that they're already aware of, that they're gonna send to her. That was my point. We'll put in 20,000 instead of 100,000, figure out the same thing.
That really saying, is this gonna help us identify?
It's not that we don't already identify, but you'll have consultants that know more about what we're trying to identify.
So there probably will be.
Says future.
It's for
So
future.
in other words, it's not problems that are here now.
No, they're
problems
here
that
now.
need to deal
They're
with.
here now, but they're gonna give you a little more foresight into what that's gonna turn into.
You're reading a lot. We got a lot.
Brian wasn't here for me this morning, but this is really basic, your span.
Yes.
Yeah, very well done. It's what, and so our highway people already know where their problem areas lie, and they're only gonna get worse whether the climate changes or not.
And this doesn't affect all of our departments that would be asking for information.
Well, soil and water might be involved, there'll be, there'll be a lot of group, but yeah, these are problems that we already know are coming. It doesn't matter what title you put on it, but you put a title on it and get funding for it.
But government work, this is just the beginning.
Yes.
This is gonna show you next steps. Because after this, you're now gonna know where problem areas are. The next grant application is gonna be for mitigation. This is the beginning of a road that you're going to.
Which you're gonna have to do eventually, and this is the funding to do this stuff up front.
Right, to begin funding. All right, motion on the floor. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed?
No.
Fails.
Fails.
Yeah.
Yeah,
One
you need to be unanimous.
more.
You don't have enough people here.
Give me.
You have to bring it back next month. Well, I can't just bring something to finance. But you can't move it to finance because it's still going on. This is the way the committee system's supposed to work.
Anybody can put a motion.
This is the way the committee's supposed to work.
So FYI, next month is too late because the things are due, right? So we're done if it doesn't. Move on to somewhere.
Can't move things.
Right.
It's dead, right here, in this code, so.
We're gonna have to floor.
Right, exactly.
That's, what's our board meeting in July?
Too late.
Too late.
Too late, July? Oh, it's 21st.
Well, but I mean, you couldn't write a grant like this in 2 or 3 days. I mean,
If I tell her, don't.
That's like, you don't know what you're, I had the S under my shirt.
I could.
Yeah.
I'm very.
Any other business to come before the Ag Planning Tourism Committee? All right, being none, we adjourn. Thank you.
That was a good one.